Chapter 498. Su Qingsang saw He Xianyao at first glance. Naturally, she didn't miss the gloating look in Li Wanyu's eyes. She turned to look at Hu Jinyao and gave him a look. Hu Jinyao reached out and squeezed her palm, indicating that she had him to take care of everything. The corners of Su Qingsang's mouth lifted slightly. She found that she quite trusted Hu Jinyao now. The feeling of trusting a person, especially a man, was too subtle. But she found that she didn't have the initial resistance. Jinyao. Li Wanyu didn't miss the small interaction between Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao. To be honest, she felt a little uncomfortable. She felt that ever since Hu Jinyao got married, he had become less and less like the old Hu Jinyao. She would rather Hu Jinyao be as cold and aloof as he used to be. She didn't want him to ignore other women and only treat Su Qingsang well. Brother Jinyao. Xianyao and I happened to be free today, so we came to visit Auntie. We were just talking about you. Yeah, Hu Jinyao responded. Brother Jinyao. Li Wanyu was obviously dissatisfied with his cold attitude. However, He Xianyao tugged at her sleeve at this moment. After receiving He Xuanyao's hint, Li Wanyu stopped talking for the time being. Since you're back, it's just in time. Enjo has prepared dinner. You can eat later. As she spoke, she looked at He Xianyao affectionately and even reached out to pull her to her side. Stay and have dinner with me today. As long as Auntie doesn't mind. How could I dislike it? Lu Tongjia glanced at Su Qingsang out of the corner of her eye as she spoke. You're getting old, so it's inevitable that people will dislike you. You don't know how happy I am that you are willing to accompany me. Su Qingsang looked at the scene in front of her, speechless. People who didn't know better would think that He Xianyao was Lu Tongjia's child. Hu Jinyao squeezed her hand. His expression didn't change at all. Mom, where are Dad and Grandpa? Your grandfather went to your granduncle's place. Lu Tongjia had called He Xianyao over because the old man wasn't home today. If the old man was here, He Xianyao wouldn't have a chance. Not only was old Master Hua not there, but she also asked Hua Mingguang to send old Master Hua over. Li Wanyu sat at the dining table watching Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao sitting together. Even if she didn't like Su Qingsang, she had to admit it. When the two of them sat down, their bodies actually had a similar aura. One was handsome and the other was delicate. Most importantly, she watched Hu Jinyao put food and ladle soup into Su Qingsang's bowl naturally. It looked like he was very skilled. When had she ever seen Hu Jinyao like that? For a moment, their eyes widened. Even though she had no romantic feelings for Hu Jinyao, she couldn't help but feel jealous when she saw how well he treated a woman. Speaking of which, Hu Jinyao was obviously the one who had known them longer, wasn't he? When had they ever seen him being nice to little sisters from aristocratic families like them? Li Wanyu was fine. Even if she felt uncomfortable, there was no love between a man and a woman, so she only felt her teeth ache. Did these two do it on purpose? She didn't believe that they were usually like this. He Xianyao had the same thought as Li Wanyu. She thought the scene in front of her was a public display of affection. Brother Jinyao, does Miss Su have no hands? Does she even need you to put food into her bowl? Su Qingsang, who had picked up her bowl of soup, was stunned and looked up at He Xianyao. She was about to speak, but Hu Jinyao pressed the back of her hand. Miss, he is so young. How can she not see? He Xuanyao's face darkened. Seeing Lu Tongjia staring at Hu Jinyao angrily, she regained her courage and said, Of course I can see Miss Su's hands. She's an adult, but she still needs you to take care of her. Thinking about it, Brother Jinyao, you must be working hard. It's not hard at all. Hu Jinyao looked calm. Instead of restraining himself, he put more food into Su Qingsang's bowl with his chopsticks. I like to take care of her. Do you have a problem with that? He Xuanyao's face was pale. She felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. Enough. Lu Tongjia glanced at He Xianyao. How could she be liked by Hu Jinyao? She used to think that she was smart. How could she be so stupid? Let's eat. Why are you talking so much? She said to Hu Jinyao. She looked at He Xianyao again. Although she hated her for being so useless, she softened her tone and said, Xianyao, Hu Jinyao is just like that. He's not targeting you. Don't take it to heart. Su Qingsang really admired Lu Tongjia at this moment. She was really good at lying through her teeth. Looking at Hu Jinyao, she quietly put some beef into his bowl with her chopsticks and smiled at him. The meaning of that look was quite obvious. See, I'm taking care of you too. Hu Jinyao smiled. The corners of his mouth turned up, and he seemed to be in a good mood. He liked that Su Qingsang looked cold, but from time to time she would show a bit of slyness like a fox. The interaction between the two of them seemed to be carried out quietly. But they weren't blind. Li Wanyu looked at Hu Jinyao and Su Qingsang, then looked at He Xianyao. She suddenly felt that He Xuanyao's fighting ability was so weak that she probably had no chance. She had come here for nothing. Looking at He Jinyao, he didn't care about anyone else. Although she was spoiled, she was also proud. Naturally, she wouldn't do anything that would lower her status. Maybe she should listen to her brother and stay out of these things. Li Wanyu thought for a while and understood, but He Xianyao didn't. She had liked He Jinyao before. Later, when she was humiliated, she not only refused to give up, but also became more and more unwilling. Now, with Lu Tongjia's support, she felt that she could still fight for him. After dinner, Li Wanyu sat with Su Qingsang for a while. She saw that Su Qingsang and He Jinyao were so intimate, as if there was no one else around. She was more and more sure of her previous thoughts. The most important thing was that she still had to worry about Li Junxing. If Li Junxing knew that she had intervened in He Jinyao's business, he would probably be unhappy. Thinking of this, Li Wanyu didn't want to stay any longer, so she got up and said goodbye. Lu Tongjia was surprised that Li Wanyu wanted to leave so early, but Li Wanyu wasn't the highlight of the night, so she didn't have to ask her to stay. She asked He Jinyao to see Li Wanyu off. When she asked He Xianyao to come today, she specifically told her not to drive over. He Jinyao sat next to Su Qingsang and didn't move. Don't we have a chauffeur at home? Lu Tongjia's face suddenly darkened. You and Junxing are so close. What's wrong? Can't you take your sister home for a while? It's okay. It's the same if the chauffeur takes her home. Li Wanyu was smart now. No matter what Lu Tongjia and He Xianyao wanted to do, she didn't want to get involved. No way. Let Jinyao take you home. Lu Tongjia was very insistent. She stared at He Jinyao with obvious dissatisfaction. She had made up her mind to let him take Li Wanyu home. Jinyao, just take her home. Su Qingsang didn't know what Lu Tongjia was planning, but she didn't mind seeing what else Lu Tongjia wanted to do. He Jinyao gave Su Qingsang a disapproving look, but Su Qingsang winked at him. The two of them had been together for a few months and had gradually developed a tacit understanding. He Jinyao understood with one look from her. Although he didn't agree, he still stood up and said, Wanyu, let's go. After all, she was Li Junxing's sister and lived not far from the He family. She reluctantly took her home. He Jinyao left, leaving only Lu Tongjia, Su Qingsang and He Xianyao in the living room. Lu Tongjia held He Xuanyao's hand and talked to her affectionately. Su Qingsang looked at the two of them, who were as warm as mother and daughter. Not only did she not feel annoyed, but she also found it interesting. He Xianyao was a little proud at first, but this smugness soon disappeared. Su Qingsang didn't look sad at all. She didn't even look aggrieved. Instead, she looked like she was watching a good show. Didn't she care about Lu Tongjia's feelings for her at all? She didn't know that Su Qingsang was really strong-willed. As an illegitimate daughter, she was ignored by Li Qianxue and looked down on by the servants of the Li family. Compared to them, Lu Tongjia's case was nothing. Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang's calm face, and her anger rose little by little. She patted He Xuanyao's hand and said with a sigh, speaking of which, Jinyao has been busy with work these years. Thank you for coming here to keep me company. Auntie, you're welcome. I'm not being polite. I really like you. Lu Tongjia glared at Su Qingsang as she spoke. Her attitude towards He Xianyao was completely different from how she treated Su Qingsang. She looked at He Xianyao as if she was looking at her own daughter. Xianyao, it would be great if you were my daughter-in-law. Auntie. No matter how thick-skinned He Xianyao was, she was still very embarrassed. I'm telling the truth. You're so polite and considerate. I believe that if you were my daughter-in-law, you would take good care of Jinyao, and not just let him take care of you. As she spoke, she glanced at Su Qingsang again. The meaning of that look was very obvious. Su Qingsang didn't seem to see it. She touched her nose and felt that the scene in front of her was quite interesting. But it's not too late. Xianyao, are you willing to be my daughter-in-law? Su Qingsang blinked. She, the main character, was still here. Was it really okay for them to say this in front of me? Auntie. He Xianyao blushed. I am willing. Su Qingsang was glad that she didn't drink water. If she drank water now, she would definitely spit it out. I knew I was right about you. Lu Tongjia breathed a sigh of relief. When she looked at Su Qingsang, there was contempt in the corner of her eyes. After all, you're much better than some selfish people who only care about themselves. Auntie? After hearing that, Su Qingsang asked casually, does Jinyao have any other brothers? Don't play dumb. I'm talking about Jinyao. Chapter 499. Auntie. He Xianyao was embarrassed, but she still nodded. I do. Lu Tongjia seemed to have found some courage. She turned to Su Qingsang and said, Did you hear that? She does. Yes. Su Qingsang nodded. She wasn't deaf. Missy likes to be a mistress. If she hadn't wanted to figure out what Lu Tongjia and He Xianyao were up to, she would have left already. She didn't expect to hear such a ridiculous conversation. Since they were so shameless, she couldn't be blamed for being rude. He Xuanyao's face turned from red to white. She stared at Su Qingsang as if she wanted to burn a hole in her body. What are you talking about? Lu Tongjia couldn't bear it anymore. Who wants to be a mistress? If you don't want to be a mistress, how do you plan to marry Jinyao? Su Qingsang blinked. Her pretty face was full of confusion. Why do I remember that I'm Jinyao's wife? Why don't you just divorce Jinyao? Lu Tongjia looked at Su Qingsang and didn't hide her dissatisfaction. Why don't you look at yourself? How are you good enough for Jinyao? Auntie. It's not up to you or me to decide whether I'm good enough for him or not. It's up to Jinyao to decide. Don't you think so? At the very least, if Jinyao wants a divorce or has other thoughts, he'll come to me himself. It's not right for you to make the decision for him. Su Qingsang, you think you have him in your hands, don't you? Auntie, you may have misunderstood. Su Qingsang knew that Lu Tongjia didn't like her, but she didn't really mind. After all, she wasn't money. Not everyone liked her. Jinyao and I are equal. I don't have him in my hands and he doesn't need me to. That's one thing. Secondly, Jinyao and I have registered our marriage certificate. We are legally married. Our relationship is protected by the law. Even you don't have the right to ask for a divorce. Su Qingsang, don't you feel ashamed saying that? What did you do to make Jinyao marry you? Do you really think other people are stupid and can't figure it out? What method did she use? Su Qingsang blinked her eyes. She really didn't know when she had played tricks on Jinyao. Su Qingsang, if you still want to save face, you should take the initiative to give up your position. Don't make everyone look bad when the time comes. Auntie, I'm sorry. It was precisely because I wanted face that I couldn't give up my position. After all, I didn't cheat and I didn't do anything wrong. Why should I ask to leave the court? You haven't done anything wrong? You don't even want to have children. Why would the Hua family need a daughter-in-law like you? Or have you changed your mind now? Are you willing to have children now? I don't want to. Su Qingsang was not averse to having children. After all, she was an obstetrician and gynecologist. She just felt that it was still too early for her to have a child 2 years later. However, now that she was provoked by Lu Tongjia's aggressive attitude, she became rebellious. Auntie, I can tell you very clearly. I've already discussed it with Jinyao. We don't plan on having children anytime soon. Lu Tongjia was so angry that she laughed. Listen. You don't want to have children with Jinyao, and you want to stop others from having children? How can you do that in the world? Su Qingsang frowned. Before she could speak, Lu Tongjia continued, you saw it yourself. Xianyao is better than you in all aspects, whether in terms of family background or appearance. Most importantly, she is sincere to Jinyao. She doesn't have any ulterior motives. She is willing to do everything for Jinyao to bear his children. You can't do those things. If you have self-awareness, you should divorce Jinyao as soon as possible. Don't waste his time. He Xianyao blushed and sat on the side without saying anything. Su Qingsang looked at the shy look on her face and suddenly smiled. Auntie, I don't dare to say whether I will waste his time or not. But if Missy really wants to be with him, I'm afraid that will really be a waste of his time. Her slightly narrowed eyes were full of cunning. She had known that He Xianyao was shameless for a long time. Since that was the case, there was no need to save her face. After all, she took off her clothes and slept with Jinyao, but he didn't have any reaction. Under such circumstances, how could Jinyao have a child with her? He Xuanyao's face was like a color palette that had been overturned. Her face was green, then white, then red, then black. She looked at Su Qingsang and suddenly stood up. She bit her lip and was about to rush out. Xianyao. Lu Tongjia grabbed her hand and turned to look at Su Qingsang. What nonsense are you talking about? You can ask Jinyao whether I'm talking nonsense or not. Su Qingsang stood up. She was tired of watching the show and didn't want to see it anymore. Miss He, if you want to have a child with Jinyao, I won't object. But the premise is that you can find a way to make Jinyao interested in you. Otherwise, how are you going to have a child? You are shameless. He Xianyao knew what she had done, but when she saw the faint doubt on Lu Tongjia's face, she couldn't say what she had done. She turned to Su Qingsang and said, don't be too proud. Jinyao is just infatuated with you. He will see it sooner or later. Yes, it's okay. Infatuation is better than not having feelings for you. But you should think about what you can do next time. After all, you stripped naked in front of a man but he ignored you. That's so embarrassing. He Xinyao bit her lip hard. She didn't care that Lu Tongjia was still holding her hand. She shook off Lu Tongjia's hand and rushed out without looking back. She left in a hurry, but Su Qingsang could still hear her sobbing and see a few drops of tears falling from her eyes. Lu Tongjia's face darkened. She stared at Su Qingsang with her sharp eyes as if she wanted to pierce through her. Okay. I didn't know that you were such a sharp-tongued person. Annie, you are too kind. Su Qingsang took it as a compliment. I'm actually quite clumsy. I just like to tell the truth. Lu Tongjia's face turned green. Okay. You are indeed a schemer. I want to see. How long can you use those tricks on Jinyao? Andy, I want to know too. How about I ask him for you next time? Su Qingsang found that she was becoming more and more shameless in front of Lu Tongjia. Lu Tongjia was so angry that she couldn't speak. In the end, she could only glare at Su Qingsang, turn around and go upstairs without looking back. Su Qingsang felt a little helpless. Although she knew that it wasn't entirely her fault, she felt a little wrong that Lu Tongjia hated her so much. She turned around and saw that Hu Jinyao had come back. He stood at the gate and looked at her with a faint smile on his face. You're back. Before she could walk up to him, Hu Jinyao had already walked up to her, reached out and pulled her into his arms. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead, with a smile on his face. You didn't give it away? Why are you back so soon? Not far. Hu Jinyao didn't want to tell her that he had warned Li Wanyu in the car. He was willing to care about his friendship with Li Junxing, but Li Wanyu had to think clearly about whether she was going to go against him. He suddenly lowered his head and pressed his forehead against her face. He Xinyao wants to have children with me. You don't object? What are you thinking? Su Qingsang blushed. Did he hear that? I'm not interested in her. Hu Jinyao suddenly carried her in his arms. But I don't agree with what you said. He lowered his head and looked at her, his eyes full of seriousness. Next time, if someone says they want to have children with me, you can just say that I don't agree. After all, I'm yours now. Su Qingsang put her arms around his neck when she lost her balance. She also raised her head to look at him. Mine alone? Of course. Mrs. Hua. Su Qingsang smiled because of the way he called her Mrs. Hua. The drama she had just watched would be a sideshow. She took the initiative to put her lips on his and gave him a sweet kiss. However, when she was about to move away, Hu Jinyao caught her lips and deepened the kiss. With his tall figure, Hu Jinyao easily carried Su Qingsang upstairs. As for He Xinyao, who had made such a scene today, who cared about her? When Su Qingsang saw Shi Mengwan at the airport, her face was especially bright. She almost jumped up and hugged her. Previously, Shi Mengwan had said that she would come to Rong City to play with her. However, after waiting for more than a week, there was no news. She thought that she wouldn't come. Seriously, you only sent me a message before you got on the plane. Fortunately, I didn't have surgery today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to pick you up. Although she didn't have surgery today, she had to go to work. Fortunately, Sun Huiya saw that she usually behaved well. She agreed immediately when she asked for leave for a while. I just wanted to give you a surprise. Shi Mengwan pulled her clothes. Although it was already spring in Rong City, it was much colder than Lin City. Looking around, she was a little disappointed. Why is there no snow? Did you think there would be snow? It melted long ago. Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll take you to the snow country next time. The snow had melted long ago. Besides, even in the north, it didn't snow every day. Okay. But this time I'll eat you first. Warmly welcome. Su Qingsang took the luggage from her hands and took her to the parking lot outside. After putting her luggage in her car, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao got in. When Shi Mengwan got off the plane, she wore a scarf and sunglasses. Now that she was in the car, she took off the scarf and sunglasses, revealing her face. Su Qingsang was about to start the car, but when she saw her face, she stopped. She leaned over and stared at Shi Mengwan's face. Chapter 500. Really? Shi Mengwan touched her face and looked at Su Qingsang with a guilty smile. Maybe it's because I stayed up late drawing last night. Su Qingsang poked her forehead. I'm not in Lin City and you're messing around, aren't you? I'm not messing around. Shi Mengwan's smile became more and more stiff when she thought of running into Zhan Haoza again yesterday. Meeting Su Qingsang's concerned eyes, she reached out and hooked her arm. She said half-jokingly, "Who told you to abandon me? You're not in Lin City and I can't even eat." "Poor you. Su Qingsang clicked her tongue and patted her on the shoulder. Okay, I'll take you to eat delicious food today. Of course. Shi Mingwan glared at her. You're the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. Aren't you embarrassed to ask me to eat at a roadside stall? There's nothing to be embarrassed about. If you complain again, I'll treat you to spicy hot pot. Spicy hot pot. Speaking of which, the two of them ate quite a lot when they first lived together. Because there was one not far away from them, it was convenient and simple. Okay. I'll eat it if you dare to treat me. After eating, I'll post it on WeChat and Weibo. I want everyone to know how stingy Mrs. Hua is now. Post it. Hurry up. Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan chatted and laughed. The two of them seemed to have returned to the time when they first lived together. She was too happy to see her good friend, so she didn't notice the flash of worry in Shi Mingwan's eyes. Su Qingsang brought Shi Mingwan home and let her stay in the guest room. Shi Mingwan entered the door and looked at the decoration in front of her. Not bad. This is definitely low-key luxury. It had a minimalist modern style, but one could tell that everything inside was of high quality. She often designed wedding dresses for clients, so she knew about some cutting-edge brands. This house belongs to Hu Jinyao? Then he had good taste. Yes. It's close to his company and not far from our hospital. So we'll stay here. This apartment only had one floor. However, it connected the two into one. They were the only family on the entire floor. The two families made the room look very big. Not only that, but there was also a huge balcony on the top floor. When they had nothing to do, they could enjoy the scenery from up there. However, Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao didn't have much time. He placed Shi Mingwan's luggage in one of the guest rooms. Fortunately, Su Qingsang had thought that Shi Mingwan would come over, so she had packed everything. Su Qingsang took out the bedsheets and spread them on the bed. Shi Mingwan wanted to do it, but Su Qingsang asked her to sit down and chat with her. Shi Mingwan looked around but didn't see Xiang Kaiping. She was a little confused. Why didn't I see Auntie? Isn't she living with you? With Xiang Caiping's personality, why didn't she live with Su Qingsang? Su Qingsang paused in the middle of making the bed. She felt that she couldn't explain it clearly on the phone. Now that she was here, she finally had the time to tell Shi Mingwan about her background. She told Xiang Kaiping about how she and Li Qianxue had reconciled with each other and how Li Qianxue had accompanied her to Rong City before the Lunar New Year. She told Xiang Kaiping about how she and Li Qianxue had come to Rong City together. Even now, Li Qianxue still video called her almost every day. As for Old Master Li and Su Yusin, they were slowly building a relationship. That's what happened. The bed was already made. Su Qingsang looked at Shi Mingwan, who was dumbfounded and shocked. Finally, she clicked her tongue, stood up, walked to Su Qingsang and walked around her. Oh my god. Your background is actually so bizarre? Su Qingsang found it unbelievable. I didn't believe it at first. But the paternity test can't be fake. Moreover, only she knew that she was touched, grateful and protective of Xiang Kaiping, but she didn't have the instinct to get close to her. Shi Mingwan suddenly patted her on the shoulder. Good girl, you knew it during the new year, didn't you? You didn't tell me? You're not a good friend. Su Qingsang pressed her lips into a straight line and looked a little guilty. I'm sorry. It's not that I didn't tell you on purpose. She didn't know what to say. More importantly, the situation at the time didn't allow for it. You know how my mother, Auntie Xiang, was at that time. Her waist was injured and she wasn't in good spirits. I was afraid that if you knew, you wouldn't be able to hide your emotions and give yourself away in front of her. So I didn't say it. Besides, she had decided to treat Xiang Kaiping as her own mother. What did it matter whether she said it or not? Shi Mingwan nodded. Although she could control her emotions, it was really a little difficult to guarantee that she wouldn't reveal anything. It must have been hard for you. You hid it for so long? Speaking of which, you stayed with her for so long. Didn't she suspect anything? No. Su Qingsang shook her head. Why would she suspect anything? She felt guilty and uneasy at that time, so she naturally wouldn't think so much. That's true. Thinking of what Xiang Kaiping said in front of her at that time, Shi Mingwan could really understand. Then where's Auntie Xiang now? I didn't ask any more. Su Qingsang thought of the last time she met Xiang Kaiping. She blamed her for not telling her earlier, and the two of them parted on bad terms. But I heard that Su Peijian has accepted her as her mother and moved in with her. I think she should be slowly building a relationship with Su Peijian. Speaking of which, it was really a very tragic thing. She and Li Qianxue, Xiang Kaiping and Su Peijian. They were mother and daughter, but because of Su Qinghui's actions, they had to rebuild their mother-daughter relationship. They were related by blood, but they couldn't get along like a normal mother and daughter. Shi Mingwan quite liked Xiang Kaiping. Thinking of Su Peijian's personality, she instinctively frowned. With Su Peijian's personality, will she accept Auntie Xiang? Why do I feel that this is so magical? Why not? Su Qingsang didn't think it was strange. After all, she is her biological mother. Moreover, she had her own reasons for abandoning her. Maybe. Shi Mingwan didn't want to talk about conspiracy theories. Anyway, she felt that Su Peijian wasn't the kind of person who would so easily accept a strange woman as her mother. So, you and your mother are your biological mother? How is your relationship now? She didn't forget that every time Li Qianxue saw Su Qingsang, she would look at her with disdain. His face was filled with disdain and disregard. Now that she knows that Su Qingsang is her biological daughter, her expression must be very interesting. It was a pity that she didn't get to see it. That's good. She had been busy with work recently. After all, my father left the Li Corporation and she has to make many decisions. Old Master Li was getting on in years. Li Qianxue couldn't bear to see him work himself to death. Therefore, Li Qianxue was now in charge of the company. Su Yusin didn't live on campus anymore. When he was free, he would go to the company to help out. In any case, his grades were good and he would not lag behind in his studies. Helping out at the company could be considered as an early internship. Although Li Qianxue didn't need Su Yusin to be so busy, it would be better to have a child to accompany her. Your father is no longer in the Li Corporation? So where is he now? What are you doing? I don't know. Su Qingsang shook her head. She really had no idea. He had heard from Su Yusin that Su Qinghui had visited him a few times and only said some words of concern. He also apologized to Su Yusin for neglecting him in the past. Also, asked him to take care of the family. He said that he was about to become an adult and was an adult. Su Qingsang didn't know if he had visited Li Qianxue. Because Li Qianxue seemed to be very reluctant to mention Su Qinghui. She had asked her once. Although Li Qianxue wasn't angry, she could see that her expression wasn't good. Su Qinghui had actually called her once, and the content was also to apologize. To apologize for his decision to replace the child. Unlike Li Qianxue, Su Qingsang didn't blame Su Qinghui too much. In fact, she was more willing to believe that Su Qinghui was impulsive back then. Even if he had done it on purpose, things had already turned out this way. She also didn't want to let herself fall into the mood of being responsible and didn't want to blame him. After that, Su Qinghui never contacted her again. She did take the initiative to call Su Qinghui twice, but the father and daughter didn't have much affection before, so they didn't know what to say when they really called. They just said a few greetings and then hung up. Su Qinghui cared about her situation in Rong City and told her to take good care of herself. It had been half a month since the last call. Therefore, Su Qingsang didn't know where Su Qinghui was and what he was doing. He probably doesn't want others to see him like this. After all, Su Qinghui's current state shouldn't be too good. Not only did he leave the Li Corporation, but he also divorced Li Qianxue. More importantly, after the divorce, he realized that he actually had feelings for Li Qianxue. It was really quite ironic. When he had it, he didn't know how to cherish it. When he lost it, he wanted to get it back but found that there was no chance. Shi Mingwan thought of the few times she had interacted with Su Qinghui in the past and felt a little emotional. Did your mother really divorce him just like that? Yes. Su Qingsang actually didn't want to believe it, but Li Qianxue was such a proud person. She probably really didn't want to look back. During this period of time, she could actually see the hidden fatigue in Li Qianxue's eyes. Although she had been the president of the Li Corporation for so many years, many things were Su Qinghui who took the initiative to help her bear the responsibility. In addition to the previous cooperation between the Li Corporation and Tianyu Group, Li Qianxue had been very busy recently. Sometimes when she video called her at night, she was still in the office dealing with business. Su Qingsang actually felt a little sorry. She wanted to persuade Li Qianxue that even if they divorced, she could let Su Qinghui continue to work in the Li Corporation. However, thinking of Li Qianxue's personality, she didn't say that suggestion in the end. She wanted to say a few words, but Li Qianxue obviously didn't want to. Chapter 501. Let's not talk about them. Let's go out for dinner. Su Qingsang took out her phone and called Hu Jinyao to ask if he was done with work. If not, they could have dinner together. Hu Jinyao had a business meeting that night. She hung up the phone and smiled at Shi Mingwan. There's no other way. It's just the two of us tonight. Hu Jinyao has been very busy recently. He seems to have a lot of things to do in the company. But don't worry, he'll treat you to a big meal tomorrow. Shi Mingwan put her arm around Su Qingsang's arm. What? Are you afraid that I'll be unhappy? It's better without Hu Jinyao. The two of us can have a good talk. After telling Ms. Yu that she didn't have to cook that day, Su Qingsang took Shi Mingwan to the restaurant closest to her house. This is the property of a friend of Hu Jinyao. The dishes here are very special and the name is nice. Although there were only two of them, when Su Qingsang showed her gold card, the waiter immediately took her upstairs to a private room specially prepared for the VIPs. Sure. Mrs. Hua. Shi Mingwan took a step back and looked at Su Qingsang. Have you noticed that ever since you started dating Hu Jinyao, you've become more and more like a rich lady? Nonsense again. Haven't I always been like this? She rarely came to places like this. She usually came with Hu Jinyao. But Hu Jinyao's friends were nice. This restaurant was the property of Wan Xianyang's family. He was the one who gave her the gold card. The two of them were taken upstairs by the waiter. Su Qingsang asked Shi Mingwan and ordered a few signature dishes. While waiting for the dishes to be served, they talked about each other's recent situations. Su Qingsang didn't have much to say. Hospital home. Speaking of which, ever since Lu Tongjia had a disagreement with her, she had been summoned back to the Hua family twice by Old Master Hua. He Xinyao was there both times. But Old Master Hua was there, so He Xinyao only went to visit Old Master Hua as a junior. After dinner she didn't stay long and left. During that time, Lu Tongjia kept praising how considerate and polite He Xinyao was. Not only did she visit her often, but she also went shopping with her. Last time, she also went with her to the Women's Chamber of Commerce. The Women's Chamber of Commerce in Rong City was actually founded by the wives of the well-known families in the business world. Usually he would do some charity work. On one hand she was helping others. On the other hand she was promoting her husband's company. Xinyao might have done it. Speaking of which, she has helped a lot with the company's business. Whoever marries her in the future will marry a good wife. Even though Old Master Hua was there, Lu Tongjia didn't mind praising He Xinyao. The others could tell that Lu Tongjia was unhappy with Su Qingsang. However, Su Qingsang pretended that she didn't notice it. She continued to act as normal with Hu Jinyao. For the second time, Lu Tongjia praised He Xinyao to the heavens and said that it was a pity that such a good daughter-in-law didn't marry into the Hua family. Hu Jinyao glanced at the Hua brothers, who were also present. Yes, Mom. Fertile water should not flow to outsiders. Since you think Miss He is so good, why don't you let Yifan or Yang be with her? She's married into the Hua family. Lu Tongjia's and Hui Yifan's expressions changed at that simple sentence. He Xinyao liked Hu Jinyao. Not only did he not appreciate it, but he also wanted her to be with the Hua brothers. Didn't he mean that he wanted Hui Yifan to marry someone he didn't like? Lu Tongjia was even angrier. Her son didn't give her any face. She wanted to lose her temper, but He Xinyao couldn't stay. No matter how thick-skinned she was, she couldn't stand being kicked around like a ball. She ran away before the meal was finished. After she left, no matter how unhappy Hui Yifan and Lu Tongjia were, they couldn't do anything. After that, Su Qingsang felt peaceful. At least, Lu Tongjia didn't call to ask them to go home for dinner. Su Qingsang and Hu Jinyao could handle these things themselves, so Su Qingsang didn't think it was necessary to tell Shi Mingwan. I'm fine, but you. Su Qingsang looked at the faint shadow under Shi Mingwan's eyes. Although I'm not in Lin City, don't work too hard. That was your own studio to begin with. It doesn't matter if you have more or less jobs. Don't risk your life for money. No, I didn't. I just took 2 more jobs after the design competition. Don't worry. I'll be relieved after this. Shi Mingwan lowered her head and used the act of drinking water to hide her guilty conscience. Su Qingsang had been her good friend for many years. If Shi Mingwan acted the slightest bit weird, Shi Mingwan would easily notice. Mingwan, why don't you come to Rong City to develop your career? Su Qingsang suggested seriously. You see, you have a studio anyway. It's the same wherever you go. If you come to Rong City, we'll have company again. What do you think? No. Shi Mingwan refused without thinking. I already have a foundation in Lin City. I don't want to leave it behind. Why do you want to leave it behind? Make it the headquarters and open a branch here. As for the business, you don't have to worry about it. With Hu Jinyao's connections, your studio will definitely be successful. She believed that Hu Jinyao would be very willing to help. No need. Rely on your Hu Jinyao? I don't want to. Moreover, even though Lin City wasn't my original home, it was still very close to my home no matter what. I think it'll be convenient for me to go home to see my parents. If I come to Rong City, it'll be inconvenient for me to go home to see my parents. Shi Mingwan's home was in another city not far from Lin City. There was no airport there. Shi Mingwan usually went home to see her parents by train or car. Occasionally she drove herself. If she really came to Rong City, it would be inconvenient for her to go home to see her parents. It's fine if you don't come, but you have to promise me. Take good care of yourself. Don't worry. I will. Shi Mingwan was too embarrassed to say that she didn't look very well these days because of Zhang Haoze, and it had nothing to do with her staying up late to draw pictures. Su Qingsang was really worried when she said that. Shi Mingwan used to draw day and night. In the past, she lived close to Lin City, so she always had time to keep an eye on her. Now she was really worried. Thinking about it, she suddenly had a suggestion. Speaking of which, since you're here, why don't I ask Hu Jinyao to take you to meet his childhood friends next time? I think they're all good people. They're all elites. Do you want to pick one of them? Su Qingsang was willing to believe that Zhang Haoze, whom Shi Mingwan had met before, was her big brother. But he already had a fiancée. Shi Mingwan really wanted to wait for him for the rest of her life. Su Qingsang felt wronged for her. Shi Mingwan's appearance and figure were both excellent. Even if her family background wasn't the best, she had opened her own studio and the business was good. Her reputation was also slowly building. It would be a pity to spend the rest of her life with that completely impossible person. We'll see. Shi Mingwan didn't want to talk about it. I don't want to get married now. Who asked you to get married? I'm asking you to fall in love. It's okay to enjoy love, right? Even if you don't think it's suitable in the future, you can break up. If it were anyone else, Su Qingsang wouldn't have persuaded her like this. But seeing Shi Mingwan wait for her big brother year after year, who knew where he had forgotten her, she really felt that it wasn't worth it. All right. You don't have to worry about my business. You can just live a good life with Hu Jinyao. She didn't want to mention it, so Su Qingsang didn't say it. She and Hu Jinyao had been very close recently. They were almost as sweet as honey. Naturally, she also hoped that her best friend could be happy. Shi Mingwan was still thinking about how to change the topic away from herself when her phone rang. She took it out and glanced at it. The word, enemy, on it made her look a little uncomfortable all of a sudden. I'm going out to take a call. Shi Mingwan took her phone and walked out. She didn't know why Zhang Haoze called her. She clenched her phone tightly and turned off the sound. She walked out of the private room and didn't decide whether she should answer it or not. If she answered it, what would she say? While she was still struggling, the phone had already been hung up. Shi Mingwan was a little surprised, but it seemed to be expected. Leaning against the wall, she held her phone and leaned against the wall, unable to come back to her senses for a long time. Just as she was about to go back to the private room, her phone rang again. Thinking it was still Zhang Haoze, Shi Mingwan picked it up without looking. Unexpectedly, it was a call from the studio. Her face was full of disappointment. After talking about the main topic, she looked at the phone screen that had gone dark. She let out a long sigh and didn't return Zhang Haoze's call. She walked towards the private room, but saw a woman in front of her coming out of the elevator and entering one of the private rooms. That figure looked like Su Peijian. Shi Mingwan blinked. Before she could see clearly, the other party had already entered the room. She was slightly nearsighted, so for a moment she wasn't even sure if it was really her or if she was seeing things. She looked again and found that not long after, another man followed her into the room. Shi Mingwan watched for a while longer and finally believed that she might have seen things wrong. Su Peijian should still be in Lin City at this time, right? How could she be in Rong City? Besides, why did she come to Rong City? Shaking her head, Shi Mingwan didn't take this matter to heart. If the person who saw that figure just now was Su Qingsang, then she would know that the person sitting only 3 private rooms away from them was Su Peijian. At the whole family. Lu Tongjia sat on the sofa in the room and looked at Hu Mingguang, who was reading a book. Her face was obviously dissatisfied. What do you mean? As the current chairman of Tianyu Group, is it so difficult for you to arrange for someone to enter the company? Tongjia. Hu Mingguang put the book in his hand aside and said, It's not that it's difficult for me to arrange for someone, but you have to arrange for this person to be by Jinyao's side. Jinyao's people were all chosen by himself. He may not use the people I give him. Chapter 502. Jinyao chooses his own secretaries. Even if I send them to him, he might not use them. He has more than one secretary. Besides, I remember that Zhang Yang's wife is going to have a baby. He seems to be planning to take a leave of absence. Don't think that I don't know. When I went to the company last time, I happened to hear it. Jinyao had more than one secretary, but Zhang Yang was the one he relied on the most. He had been with him for several years. Other than him, Yang Wenchang, his assistant, took care of everything. She didn't even want the position of an assistant. She just wanted a secretary and it wasn't a particularly important position. Why couldn't she get it? Hua Mingguang looked at Lu Tongjia and felt a little helpless. He knew what his wife was thinking. Tongjia Jinyao is already married. What did I do? Lu Tongjia looked at Hua Mingguang. She didn't think she did anything wrong. What did I do? I did it for his own good. Only Hua Jinyao would treat such a woman like a treasure. Hua Mingguang didn't know what to say. He didn't have a problem with Su Qingsang. To Jinyao, no matter what, Hua Jinyao was his son. Even if he couldn't get over it, he wouldn't be as angry as Lu Tongjia. I don't care. I don't care how you do it. Anyway, I'll leave it to you. You don't have to be so angry. I'll ask someone to arrange it tomorrow. Is that okay? Lu Tongjia finally looked a little better, but there was still a hint of worry on her face. Hua Mingguang got up, walked to Lu Tongjia and put his arm around her shoulder. I won't try to persuade you. I'm just afraid that Jinyao will be dissatisfied with you in the end. By then, he'll be dissatisfied with me? Lu Tongjia sneered. I don't need him to be satisfied with me. Which one of the things he has done has satisfied me? None, not a single one. If he doesn't satisfy me, why should I satisfy him? Am I his mother? Or is he my mother? Hua Mingguang didn't say anything. He just patted her shoulder. Lu Tongjia was depressed. She leaned her face against his chest. Mingguang, do you think I'm being unreasonable? The last time she brought He Shenyao home, old Master Hua was very dissatisfied with her and looked very angry. Later, she didn't forget to tell Hua Mingguang in private to restrain herself. Restrain? Why did she have to restrain herself? Hua Jinyao didn't restrain himself at all. She hated the old man for being so biased. It was clear that Hua Jinyao had made such a big mistake. It was clear that he had wronged everyone in the family. How could old Master Hua let him off lightly? No. Hua Mingguang had been married to Lu Tongjia for more than 30 years. They had gone through ups and downs together, so he knew her very well. He knew the pain in her heart and he also knew the difficulty in her heart. Mingguang, to tell you the truth, I really don't want to see my grandson come out of the womb of a woman like Su Qingsang. He was full of schemes and tricks. You didn't see the way she talked to me before. I really don't like her. Of course, she would not admit that she disliked Hua Jinyao even more. Because she didn't like Hua Jinyao, she was very critical of Su Qingsang. Hua Mingguang understood. Alright, don't think too much about it. I'll arrange the people for you. As for what happens next, it's not my business. Okay. Lu Tongjia nodded and looked up at Hua Mingguang. Her eyes were a little red. Mingguang, thank you. Hua Mingguang was silent and sighed in his heart. After so many years, he also had a grudge against Hua Jinyao, so he let Lu Tongjia do whatever she wanted. However, thinking of how much Hua Jinyao cared for Su Qingsang, Hua Mingguang suddenly had a vague premonition. This time, Lu Tongjia probably wouldn't get what she wanted. Shi Mingguan looked at the antique door in front of her and looked a little impressed. The environment here is really good. How did you find out? I don't need to find out. Su Qingsang glanced at her and shook the gold card in her hand. Hua Jinyao told me yesterday. He said that this place is good. It's just the right season to come here. It was Friday and Hua Jinyao had to go to work. He couldn't accompany them. More importantly, he knew that Su Qingsang wanted to have a good time with Shi Mingguan and her two good friends. President Hua is quite a good person. Shi Mingguan gave her an ambiguous look. But you really don't have to ask for leave to accompany me. It's not like I haven't traveled alone before. That's different. You came all the way here. I have to be a good host. Su Qingsang took her hand and said, let's go. Speaking of which, it's all thanks to you. After all, it's my first time here. If it weren't for the GPS and Hua Jinyao telling her the place yesterday, she might not have been able to find it. Just say that you wanted to come out and have fun, so you used me as an excuse. Shi Mingguan joked with Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang nodded repeatedly. Wow, you saw through me? I'm going to kill you. As she spoke, she reached out her hand and was about to strangle her. Shi Mingguan laughed and dodged it. After a while, the two of them entered the door together. This time, Su Qingsang brought Shi Mingguan here to go to the hot spring. This place was a gift from a client who had worked with Hua Jinyao. After that person gave the gold card to Hua Jinyao, he had only brought a few of his childhood friends here twice. This time, when Shi Mingguan came, he thought of this place. All the buildings were designed to imitate the Suzhou Gardens and looked antique. However, the privacy inside was very good. Like the Japanese hot spring hotels, each hot spring was separated by a small space. This place is really nice. Su Qingsang looked at the environment in front of her. It looks even bigger than the hot spring hotel I went to in Japan. And the environment is even better. It's not bad. Shi Mingwan also nodded, her face full of admiration. Let's go. Let's enjoy ourselves today. I heard that there's a spa next door. We can go there after we finish the hot spring. Then what are we waiting for? I can't wait. Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan first took a good look around the club. Although it was already winter, she didn't know what method the people in the club used. There were a lot of green plants that she didn't know the names of, and there were even plum blossoms. Wow. Shi Mingwan couldn't help but exclaim, why are the plum blossoms blooming at this time? Shouldn't it have bloomed already? Almost. Look, the flowering period is almost over. We're in luck. Some of the plum blossoms were about to wither. But it still didn't affect the two of them. It was really good. Shi Mingwan hugged Su Qingsang. Qingsang, I'm very satisfied with today's arrangement. Don't worry, it'll make you even more satisfied. It was Friday. Su Qingsang had time to accompany her tomorrow and the day after. In the evening, Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan went to the spa first, then went to the hot spring in the small room. The hot spring water was brought into the room from outside, and then the room was directly turned into a small hot spring pool. Although it was called a small pool, it was actually very big. It could accommodate 7 or 8 people to go into the pool together. Because of the hot spring, Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan only wore swimsuits and went into the water. The two of them soaked for a while, and Shi Mingwan heard the phone on the small table on the shore ring. The ringtone was specially set by her, and she knew it was Zhang Haoze. She was stunned for a moment and she didn't move in the hot spring. Su Qingsang was on the other side of the hot spring pool. Hearing the ringtone, she turned to look at her. Your phone is ringing. Do you want me to get it for you? No need. She had marked Zhang Haoze's name as enemy. With Su Qingsang's sharp senses, she would definitely find something wrong. I'll do it myself. Shi Mingwan got up to get the phone. After getting the phone, she looked at the number on it for a few seconds, and finally put on the bathrobe prepared by the club. Qingsang, I'll go out to take a call. Okay. Su Qingsang waved her hand and didn't think much about it. Shi Mingwan took the phone and went out, while she continued to soak in the hot spring. Not long after, she heard light footsteps, and then the sound of the door being opened. When Shi Mingwan went out, she was in a hurry and didn't close the door, but just left it unlocked. Now that the door was opened and closed, Su Qingsang thought it was Shi Mingwan coming back. Are you done with the call? What call? Why did you go outside? Uncle? Looking at the person who suddenly appeared in front of her, Su Qingsang was stunned. She wanted to scream, but at the same time she restrained herself. Then, almost instinctively, she shrank her body into the hot spring. Zhang Yichen didn't expect to see Su Qingsang here. Although it was misty in the hot spring, he could still see her clearly at a glance. The bikini that Su Qingsang was wearing, and he quickly turned around so that he wouldn't take another look. Sorry. He saw that the door was unlocked, so he thought that there was no one inside. You. Su Qingsang wanted to say something, but at that moment, there was another flurry of footsteps outside. Zhang Yichen's expression changed and he looked around. Although they were called small rooms, they weren't small at all. In addition to the hot spring, there was an inner room with a bed and a bathroom. On the side, there were cabinets for customers to hang their clothes. Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingsang, then glanced around the room. At last, he dashed into the closet where the clothes were hung. Before he went in, he glanced at Su Qingsang. He didn't say anything, but the meaning of his eyes and movement was obvious. Seeing his series of actions, Su Qingsang didn't know how to react for a moment. She heard the footsteps coming closer and closer, and then she seemed to hear someone arguing in the next room. Someone must have disturbed them. Soon, someone knocked on the door of her room. Chapter 503. After standing there for a few seconds, Su Qingsang opened the door. There were several people standing outside. Seeing her open the door, they seemed to be about to rush in. Su Qingsang quickly stood in front of them, looking at the behavior of these people in front of her. Who are you? Su Qingsang didn't let those people in. She glanced around. There were at least 5 people standing in front of her, all wearing black suits. She could also hear the protesting voices of the guests on the other side of the corridor. Obviously, they were dissatisfied with their behavior. The hot spring was very warm inside, but the wind in the corridor was a little cold. Su Qingsang tightened her bathrobe and looked at the people in front of her with a guarded expression. What do you want? The man in the lead took a step forward when he saw Su Qingsang. Sorry, our boss just lost a dog. We came to look for it. There is no dog here. Su Qingsang frowned because of what he said. Dog. Was he talking about Zhang Yichen? Yes or no, let us go in and have a look. Sir, I'm here to spend money. You came into my room casually and disturbed me while I was enjoying the hot spring. Can I complain to your boss? I'm sorry, boss. The lost dog is very valuable. We must find it. As the man spoke, he raised his hand and was about to let the people behind him rush in. How could Su Qingsang let them in? She stood in front of them and said, I advise you to think about it carefully. I'm not someone you can mess with. Do you know who I am? The man in the lead had a mustache. Hearing that, he stopped rushing in and took a step back, looking Su Qingsang up and down. Su Qingsang was wearing a bathrobe and her hair was tied up on top of her head. The man couldn't recognize her just like that. Su Qingsang stared at the man and said, I am the wife of Hu Jinyao, the president of Tianyu Group. Aren't you afraid that my husband will be unhappy if you rush in like this? The man with the mustache narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang didn't hesitate and took a big step back. Come on, you want to find a dog, right? Come in and find it. But I'm here to spend money. My husband gave me the card. He was also the one who told me to relax here. If you insist on coming in to look for it, I won't object. However, if you don't find the dog and cause me trouble, then I really don't mind telling my husband that this is how you treat your VIP customers. The mustache man still wanted to say something, but the person standing behind him took a step forward and said something to the mustache man. The man with a mustache stood there and stared at Su Qingsang. He didn't make any move to rush in, but he still had to say, We're just looking for a dog. Madam, please let us go in and take a look. I said there are no dogs here. I'm a big man. How could I not know if a dog came in or not? Or could it be that you're doing this on purpose to make me unhappy? When she said this, the manager of the club also came over. He obviously knew that Su Qingsang was here with the limited VIP gold card. When he saw Su Qingsang, he nodded vigorously with an apologetic smile on his face. Sorry. Mrs. Hua, your subordinates are immature. They're not targeting you. It's just that this dog is really my boss's beloved pet, so we must find it. Please do my boss a favor and let my people in to take a look. Just one look. Don't worry. We promise not to disturb you. Su Qingsang stood still, obviously not intending to move away. The manager could only go further. Mrs. Hua, don't worry. Our boss and Mr. Hua also know each other. They are both people in the business circle of Rong City. I believe that even if Mr. Hua was here, he would give our boss face. Why don't you let us disturb you for a few minutes? Hearing what the manager said, Su Qingsang smiled and said, Okay. Just a few minutes, right? It's okay. Come in and look for it. As she spoke, she took 2 steps into the room and then stood in front of the wardrobe casually. Go ahead. The club manager glanced at the mustache man. He came in with a few people to take a look around. The room was so big that it was easy to see if there was anyone hiding in it. The man stepped back and looked at Su Qingsang's position. Behind her was the wardrobe. The mustache man obviously wanted to look at the wardrobe. Su Qingsang smiled when she met his eyes. Sir, do you still want to search the wardrobe? What? Do you suspect that your dog can run in by itself? Come and find. As she spoke, she pretended to pull the door of the wardrobe. The mustache man cleared his throat. No need. Sorry to disturb you. The club manager also nodded vigorously. Sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Hua. We will go to Mr. Hua's place to apologize another day. No need to apologize. Su Qingsang crossed her arms in front of her chest. I came here to relax. To put it bluntly, I came here to enjoy myself. Since you know that I disturbed you, why don't you leave? What? You don't want me to stay here anymore, do you? Is this how you do business? Sorry, we will leave now. We are really sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Hua. Please understand. As the club manager spoke, the mustache man was still staring at the wardrobe behind Su Qingsang. It was obvious that he wanted to open the wardrobe and search it again. His gaze made Su Qingsang even angrier. She took a step forward, her face full of anger for being disturbed. After the manager repeatedly apologized and said that all of Su Qingsang's expenses that day were free, he left with the mustache man and the others. Su Qingsang didn't relax because they were leaving. Instead, she kept standing in front of the wardrobe. Her face was always in an unhappy state, which made the man with the mustache turn around and look at her for the last time before he left without any more doubts. Su Qingsang looked casual, but only she knew how stiff she was and how nervous she was. When the last person left, she slowly walked up and closed the door. As soon as the door was closed, she leaned against the door and didn't move. Only she felt a layer of cold sweat on her back. Just now, she was really worried that the mustache man wouldn't give up and would insist on opening the wardrobe. She waited for a while to make sure that the sound outside was far away, then went forward and opened the wardrobe. Zhang Yichen walked out of the wardrobe. Thank you. You're welcome. Su Qingsang shook her head and looked at Zhang Yichen's clothes. He was also wearing black. They were looking for you just now. Yes. Can I ask what did you do? Su Qingsang asked, then realized that she didn't ask. With Zhang Yichen's status, he couldn't say anything. Nothing. I took something from their boss. Zhang Yichen didn't say anything. Su Qingsang didn't ask any more. The people outside the door hadn't left yet, and Zhang Yichen couldn't just leave like that. Looking at Su Qingsang, who seemed to be a little embarrassed, he thanked her very sincerely. You're welcome. Su Qingsang had already calmed down. She believed that if those people wanted to come back, they wouldn't do it now. I should thank you. You gave me a chance to use my identity to pressure people. Whether it was in Lin City or Rong City now, this was the first time she used her identity to pressure people. It was interesting to think about it. Zhang Yichen looked at her. This woman was undoubtedly very smart. She had predicted all the possible reactions of those people. I think Hu Jinyao won't mind you using his identity to pressure people. Of course. He might be more than happy to do so. Thinking of Hu Jinyao, Su Qingsang's lips turned up into a faint smile. If Hu Jinyao found out about what happened today, he might even help her vent her anger again. That guy hated it when people bullied her. When she thought of Hu Jinyao, her eyes softened. Her face, which was originally only 7 points, instantly turned into 10 points. Zhang Yichen looked at her face. For a moment he couldn't move his eyes away. Sensing his gaze, Su Qingsang's smile immediately disappeared. She took a step back uncomfortably. How are you going to leave later? Why do I remember that they have surveillance cameras? My colleague broke the surveillance cameras. The time limit was 15 minutes. It had been 10 minutes since he came in. Speaking of which, he should leave now. But they are looking for you all over the world. I don't think it's easy for you to leave, right? Su Qingsang didn't want to be nosy. However, since he was here now, she might as well ask him something. After all, he was Hu Jinyao's uncle. It's okay. I have a way. While speaking, Zhang Yichen tried to keep his eyes on Su Qingsang's face. The bathrobe she was wearing was a little too big. Even though she pulled it tight, her delicate collarbones could still be seen. Also, she crossed her arms in front of her chest, which made her figure stand out. She had just been in the hot spring. Because of that, her skin looked beautiful and pink. She was as beautiful as a lotus flower that had just emerged from the water. Zhang Yichen couldn't help but think of Su Qingsang in the hot spring. Her shoulders were smooth and her skin was smooth. It turned out that the beauties in the books were real people in reality. Zhang Yichen clenched his hands and forced himself to look away. Su Qingsang didn't ask any more questions. Since Zhang Yichen said he had a way, she didn't need to worry about it. The two of them didn't say anything. They just stood there facing each other. The silence was a little awkward. Realizing the situation in front of her, Su Qingsang took a step back, wondering why Shi Mengwan hadn't shown up yet. Zhang Yichen's jaw tightened when he saw what she was doing. He tried his best to ignore her evasive attitude. He told himself that she was married and was his niece's wife. Are you in the hot spring alone? Zhang Yichen saw the door open. He thought it was an empty room, so he rushed in. He thought he could find a chance to hide. Chapter 504. Su Qingsang shook her head and said, No, I came with a friend. After that, they didn't say anything else. Su Qingsang was wearing a bathrobe, but her clothes were disheveled. She felt very uncomfortable, thinking about how to end the situation. Zhang Yichen frowned at the awkwardness on her face. He was about to say something when someone knocked on the door. Su Qingsang and Zhang Yichen looked at the door at the same time. They both thought that the other person had returned. Zhang Yichen glanced around. He couldn't hide in the wardrobe anymore. There was a small window in the bathroom, but he couldn't get through it. Su Qingsang looked anxious as well. Under such circumstances, where could Zhang Yichen hide? Zhang Yichen was about to go to the bathroom when Su Qingsang heard Shi Mengwan's voice. Why did you lock the door? I didn't lock it just now. Su Qingsang was relieved to hear Shi Mengwan's voice. She glanced at Zhang Yichen to tell him that it was okay. She turned to open the door for Shi Mengwan. As soon as the door was opened, she pulled Shi Mengwan in. She moved so fast that Shi Mengwan didn't have time to react. Qingsang you. Shi Mengwan saw Zhang Yichen when the door was closed. She gasped, then turned to Su Qingsang with her eyes wide open. This is Hu Jinyao's uncle Zhang Yichen. Su Qingsang pointed at Shi Mengwan. This is Shi Mengwan, my friend. Nice to meet you. Zhang Yichen was quite calm. He greeted Shi Mengwan like this. Nice to meet you. Shi Mingwan blinked and looked at Su Qingsang without saying a word. Nothing. I just happened to meet him. Hu Jinyao didn't allow Su Qingsang to tell Shi Mingwan what Zhang Yichen had done. Surprisingly, Shi Mingwan didn't want to keep asking. Su Qingsang also forgot to ask Shi Mingwan why she took so long to make a phone call. Normally, she would have noticed that something was wrong with Shi Mingwan. With Zhang Yichen there, Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan didn't want to go into the bathroom again. The two of them had just started bathing and wanted to stay a little longer. Su Qingsang looked at Zhang Yichen, then at Shi Mingwan. Mingwan, shall we go back to our room and get some rest? Sure. Although they all wore swimsuits when they soaked in the hot spring, it was really embarrassing to have such a big man standing next to them. Then you. Both of them looked at Zhang Yichen. The hot spring room and their room were on opposite sides of the club. If they wanted to go back, they had to go through a corridor and then a small courtyard. If they left now, what would happen to Zhang Yichen? Zhang Yichen glanced at Su Qingsang, then went to the bathroom. The window was so small that no one could climb out of it. He was in too much of a hurry just now and forgot to look for the way. He looked around and suddenly had an idea. Don't worry about me. If you want to leave, then leave. Zhang Yichen stood there without moving. Su Qingsang glanced at him and finally believed that he would handle it well. Shi Mingwan was a little confused, but she didn't ask further. The two of them brought their clothes into the small room and quickly changed. Su Qingsang was still thinking about how Zhang Yichen would leave later. However, when they came out, Zhang Yichen was already gone. Su Qingsang and Shi Mingwan looked at each other. They didn't hear the door open. They didn't know where Zhang Yichen was. Since Zhang Yichen wasn't here, the two of them went back to their own things. They changed again and went back to the hot spring. This time, those people didn't come looking for them. Zhang Yichen didn't come back either. The two of them could quietly soak in the hot spring. Shi Mingwan was soaking in the hot spring, enjoying the steam. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "What kind of uncle is this? He looks so young. He looks like he's in his 30s at most." He's the son of Hu Jinyao's great-aunt. His great-aunt wasn't young when she gave birth to him. So he's about the same age as Hu Jinyao. I see. Shi Mingwan nodded. He's quite handsome. You like him? How about I introduce him to you? No need. Shi Mingwan thought of her phone call with Zhan Haoze. The two of them didn't say a word. They just stayed silent. He didn't speak, so she didn't know what to say. She should have hung up the phone, but she didn't want to. Not only did she not want to, but she also felt that listening to Zhan Haoze's breathing was also very calming and reassuring. Therefore, although they talked on the phone for a long time, they didn't really talk much. Even so, Shi Mingwan only believed in Zhan Haoze. As for other men, she really didn't want to talk about them. Su Qingsang knew that even if she didn't say it, so she didn't ask. After soaking in the hot spring, they rested in the room of the club for the night. When they got up the next morning, the manager of the club brought them breakfast. He apologized again and again for disturbing them the day before. Su Qingsang wasn't a person who wouldn't let others off easily. The other party showed enough sincerity, so she wouldn't make things difficult for them. However, she still had to pretend that she was letting him off lightly for Hu Jinyao's sake. In fact, she was more or less curious. Where on earth had Zhang Yichen been hiding? After all, the other party had sent so many people to look for him, but he disappeared just like that. Thinking about it, it was really impressive. After all, when they went back to their room yesterday, they also observed that there was no more noise. And then they couldn't even hear the sound. That meant that Zhang Yichen must have left safely. After leaving the club and getting into the car, Shi Mingwan patted Su Qingsang on the shoulder and said, "You're good. You're becoming more and more like a rich lady." She was talking about how Su Qingsang coincidentally ran into the man with a mustache in the yard last night when she left the club. Shi Mingwan was hiding to make a phone call, so she naturally didn't know who the man with a mustache was. But Su Qingsang knew. She looked at the man with a cold face. Although there was no dissatisfaction in her eyes, her expression was definitely not good. It seemed that the man with a mustache didn't find Zhang Yichen. His expression didn't change, but she could faintly see the anxiety in his eyes. "Thank you for the compliment." Su Qingsang didn't want to be like this. But she had to keep acting. So that those people wouldn't think about what happened yesterday. More importantly, Zhang Yichen should have passed the test safely. In fact, she believed that even if she wasn't there, Zhang Yichen should have passed the test safely. Su Qingsang didn't want to think about it anymore. She had made up her mind to tell Hu Jinyao sometime. She couldn't have a third. She had met Zhang Yichen a few times in private. Although they didn't do anything, she still wanted Hu Jinyao to know. Su Qingsang had been in Rong City for a long time, but she hadn't been to many places. She wanted to focus on keeping Shi Mengwan company for the rest of the time. Hua Jingyao knew that she was keeping Shi Mengwan company. But Lu Tongjia didn't know that. Seeing that Su Qingsang didn't even come back for the weekend, Lu Tongjia naturally thought that she was dissatisfied with her. That made her even more determined to carry out her plan. She had made a backup plan. This time she didn't believe that Su Qingsang could survive it. On Saturday, Hua Jingyao was finally free. He took Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan to play in Rong City for a day. In the evening he took Su Qingsang and Shi Mengwan to have dinner with his childhood friends. He also introduced Shi Mengwan to Wan Xianyang and the others. Except for Li Junxing, who was still in Lin City, the others were all there. Li Junxing didn't come, but Li Wanyu did. She didn't know what Hua Jingyao said to her last time, but she was much more friendly to Su Qingsang today. For Su Qingsang this was a good thing. Because there were so many people, it was inevitable that it was a little noisy. Su Qingsang couldn't tell Hua Jingyao about what had happened at the club yesterday. However, there was something else that happened at the party that caught her attention. That was, Wan Xianyang seemed to be interested in Shi Mengwan. When Shi Mengwan entered the door with him, Wan Xianyang stared at her for a long time. After they sat down, he looked in Shi Mengwan's direction from time to time with obvious interest in his eyes. During dinner he sat next to Shi Mengwan on purpose. Later, when everyone went to the club under their name, Wan Xianyang didn't forget to sit next to Shi Mengwan. He asked her to eat and play. He really made his presence known in front of her. Shi Mengwan knew that these people were Hua Jinyao's friends, so she didn't disrespect them. Even when Wan Xianyang said that he wanted to sing a song with her, she stood up and sang with him. Su Qingsang had always known that Shi Mengwan had a good voice. When her voice came out, Tang Mohan and Cheng Xianyun couldn't help but look at her, not to mention Wan Xianyang. Su Qingsang could see that Shi Mengwan had to socialize with Wan Xianyang. However, Wan Xianyang obviously took it to heart. She could naturally trust Hua Jinyao's friends. If Shi Mengwan could really have something with Wan Xianyang, she thought it would be a good thing. However, looking at Shi Mengwan, she clearly didn't see Wan Xianyang as a man who was interested in her. She only saw him as Hua Jinyao's childhood friend. It seemed that there was no possibility between the two of them. But overall, this day's gathering was a joyous one for both the host and the guests. The group of people didn't go home until very late. When they got home, Shi Mengwan was also tired. She didn't intend to be a third wheel to Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao. As soon as she entered the door, she said goodbye and went back to her room to rest. After returning to her room and taking a shower, Su Qingsang took out the hairdryer to dry her hair. Hua Jinyao took the initiative to come over and take the hairdryer from her hand to help her. It wasn't the first time he had done this, so he was very skilled. His big hand stroked Su Qingsang's scalp. She felt very comfortable and even narrowed her eyes. Chapter 505. Su Qingsang opened her eyes and looked at Hua Jinyao through the mirror on the dresser. Hua Jinyao didn't want to be nosy, but before they parted, Wan Xianyang had come to him in private and asked him to ask Su Qingsang what Shi Mengwan thought of him. He had heard about Wan Xianyang's relationship before, but it had been more than a year since he broke up with his last girlfriend. It was rare for him to be interested in a woman, and she was Su Qingsang's friend, so Hua Jinyao didn't mind talking to her. I don't think so. Su Qingsang knew Shi Mengwan best. She has someone she likes. She won't be with Wan Xianyang. Wan Xianyang wasn't bad looking. He wasn't as handsome as Hua Jinyao, nor was he as masculine as Zhang Yichen. However, he looked fair, gentle and clean. He was the kind of fresh meat that people admired nowadays, but she knew that he wasn't Shi Mengwan's type. She has such high standards? Wan Xianyang's family was not bad. Most importantly, Wan Xianyang's aunt had wanted Wan Xianyang to marry for a long time. If they were really interested in each other, Hua Jinyao thought it would be a good thing. After all, Shi Mengwan was a nice person, even though she always tried to steal his wife. It's not that she has high standards. Su Qingsang thought about it and decided to tell Hua Jinyao. Mengwan likes someone like Zhang Haoze. Don't try to pull strings. Zhang Haoze? Of course Hua Jinyao knew Zhang Haoze. They had met before. Thinking about Zhang Haoze, Hua Jinyao frowned. Zhang Haoze is engaged, right? Yes. So they have no chance. But even if they had no chance, Shi Mengwan wouldn't change her mind to like someone else. Since they have no chance, let's try with Xianyang. Xianyang is a nice person and he's not a playboy. Compared with other people in Rong City, he's clean and honest. By other people, Hua Jinyao was referring to his cousin Lu Lixin, who wasn't very reliable. But my intuition tells me that she has no chance with Xianyang. When her hair was almost dry, Su Qingsang turned to look at Hua Jinyao. Jinyao, I forgot to tell you something. What? It was rare for Hu Jinyao to see her so serious. Don't tell me you also have someone you like outside? Su Qingsang glared at him and ignored his joke. The hot spring club that you asked me to go to. Are you familiar with the boss inside? Not really. Hu Jinyao was telling the truth. He worked with Tianyu Group once before. But it would only happen once. Later, I heard that his background wasn't very clean, so we didn't work together anymore. As the president of Tianyu Group, Hu Jinyao was quite picky about his collaborators. It was said that the owner of the club was quite powerful. But that background was probably a little shady. Usually the two families minded their own business. Later he spent a lot of money to build his hot spring club. Naturally he invited Hu Jinyao. For the sake of their previous cooperation, Hu Jinyao went there once. The other party was also very happy and gave him a gold card. There were too many such favors, so when he came back he just casually left it there. If it weren't for the fact that Shi Mingwan had come to visit Su Qingsang this time, Su Qingsang wouldn't have let her go. He would never have thought that there was such a place to go. So you're not familiar with him? Yes, I'm not familiar with him. Hui Yangyuan, Hu Jinyao's great-uncle, was an official. He could be called a high-ranking official. Hu Jinyao's great-uncle was also a military commander. The Hu family was very cautious. They would never let themselves make mistakes. They would not let others gossip about them. Since they knew that the other party's background was a little awkward, they naturally wouldn't rush to make friends with him. But the Hu family wouldn't be afraid of them. What's wrong? Didn't you have fun there? It's not that I wasn't happy. Su Qingsang blinked and told him about her encounter with Zhang Yichen. After all, it was a big deal in the club. If the owner of the club told Hu Jinyao about it in the future, she wanted him to know. She was also worried that if the owner of the club was really a shady person, Hu Jinyao wouldn't be able to guard against him. Is that so? Zhang Yichen wouldn't easily appear in that kind of place. Hu Jinyao's mind was working fast. He thought of some rumors he had heard before. Let's not go to that place next time. Of course we won't go there again. Since Hu Jinyao said so, Su Qingsang wasn't stupid. She wouldn't go there again. I just wanted to tell you. I didn't offend anyone openly. But at that time I still used your power to suppress them. I'm afraid that they will cause you trouble later. Hu Jinyao put his arms around her waist. He enjoyed the care and worry in her eyes. Honey, why do you care about me so much? Su Qingsang blushed a little. He was her husband. If she didn't care about him, who would she care about? Honey, why do you care about me so much? Hu Jinyao suddenly became serious again. He put his face close to Su Qingsang's. Honey, I'm so touched. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore. She took a step back to avoid his face. His hands were still on her waist. She couldn't move away at all. She put her hands on his chest and said uncomfortably, Anyway, I mean you should be careful. She didn't want to cause trouble for Hu Jinyao. But if trouble really came, she could only brace herself and face it. After all, in that situation I had no choice but to use your identity to suppress them. Fortunately it was fine. But then where did your uncle go? What did he do? I don't know. Anyway, when we got changed and came out, he was gone. Thinking of the mustached man's face the next morning, he should have passed, right? Don't worry, honey. They won't be so stupid to provoke me. It would be fine if they didn't provoke him, but if they really did provoke him, even if that person had a powerful background, so what? He wasn't afraid. Next time something like this happens, just use my identity. Hu Jinyao looked at Su Qingsang with an indulgent expression on his face. Don't be polite to those people. Just tell them who you are. If there were still people who were stupid enough to make Su Qingsang unhappy, then he wouldn't be polite. Su Qingsang was a little touched when she heard that. The feeling of having someone behind her was really good. But after thinking about it, she reached out and gently poked Hu Jinyao's chest. Do you think I cause trouble outside every day? This time it was purely an accident. If it weren't for my uncle suddenly rushing in, I would still be in the hot spring. Thinking of Zhang Yichen, Su Qingsang remembered how she was almost disheveled when he broke in. Chapter 506. She didn't want Hu Jinyao to continue the topic, so she thought of something else. Speaking of which, your uncle's family isn't bad. Why did he have to do these dangerous things? If he didn't do these dangerous things, how could he have been promoted to senior colonel in such a short time? Hu Jinyao admired Zhang Yichen very much. They had a good relationship, so he understood Zhang Yichen's choice. His uncle was already a commander. If Zhang Yichen had been relying on his father's influence, it wouldn't have been a problem. However, Zhang Yichen was obviously ambitious, so he had to work harder than others so that people wouldn't think that he got to where he was because of his connections. Alright. What do you mean by, uncle? Isn't my uncle your uncle? Su Qingsang stuck out her tongue. She couldn't tell him that Zhang Yichen looked too young. She wouldn't even think of the fact that he was one generation younger than her. Hu Jinyao suddenly narrowed his eyes, turned her body around and moved closer to her face. You just said that my uncle saw you in the hot spring? Since she was in the hot spring she wasn't wearing any clothes, was she? Hu Jinyao's face was so close that the tip of his nose almost touched hers. Su Qingsang blinked and looked into Hu Jinyao's deep eyes. That was an accident. Accident? Hu Jinyao put his hand on her shoulder and asked, Did he see you naked? His voice was not only obviously jealous, but Su Qingsang could also hear the danger in it. Looking at his enlarged face, she shook her head instinctively and said, No, I was wearing a swimsuit. Swimsuit? Which one? One-piece style? Or three-point style? Hu Jinyao said the last few words in a very low voice. His breath was warm with a cool mint smell. Su Qingsang blushed slowly and said, Three-point style. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes and stared at Su Qingsang's face. He suddenly pulled her up and led her to the walk-in closet. Then he leaned against the door and looked at her. Su Qingsang didn't understand what he meant. She blinked and stood there without moving. Hurry up. His gaze was fervent, and there was a hint of impatience in his eyes. What? Find your swimsuit and put it on. She didn't know, but Hu Jinyao didn't mind reminding her. Speaking of which, I've never seen you wear a bikini. Previously, when she went to Japan to soak in the hot springs, he said he wanted to go with her. Later, he had something to do and couldn't make it. This time, she brought Shi Mengwan to the hot spring club. He thought that it would be inconvenient for him to follow them since they were both women, so he didn't go. Speaking of which, he had never seen Su Qingsang in a swimsuit. Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang didn't want to talk to this guy. She walked past him and was about to walk out when Hu Jinyao put his arm around her waist. With a twist, he easily fixed her body on the closet door of the cloakroom. Find it yourself and change it or I'll help you. Choose one. I won't choose either. Su Qingsang shook her head. Even though she was blushing all the way to her neck, she didn't intend to compromise just like that. I'm sleepy. I'm going to bed. It's not like you're going swimming, so why are you wearing a swimsuit for him to see? He was going crazy and she wasn't going to go crazy with him. Hu Jinyao nodded. It seems that you're more inclined to let me do it. As he spoke, he held her waist tightly, not giving her a chance to run out. He rummaged through her wardrobe. She had brought some luggage to Rong City but not much. All the clothes in this closet were bought by him later. Naturally there were swimsuits among them. After all, the Hua family had a swimming pool. Hu Jinyao casually rummaged through and found several sets. There were all kinds of colors and styles. I'll take this one. Taking out a pink swimsuit, Hu Jinyao glanced at Su Qingsang's body up and down. Come on, put it on. Hu Jinyao, that's enough. She wasn't going to the swimming pool now, so why would she wear a swimsuit? Well, since you don't want it, then I have to do it myself. Hu Jinyao wasn't joking with her. He was serious. How could Su Qingsang let him do it? She took a big step back. No, I'll do it myself. Hu Jinyao gestured for her to do it. With a smile on his face, he looked at Su Qingsang with eager eyes. Su Qingsang felt uncomfortable under his gaze, and her eyes fell on the cloth in his hand. She gritted her teeth and finally took it. She was wearing pajamas, so she had to take them off to change into the swimsuit. She had undressed in front of Hu Jinyao before, but most of the time he was the one doing it. Speaking of which, it was almost the first time that she took the initiative to do it in front of him. Thinking of this, Su Qingsang became more and more uncomfortable, and even felt a little weak in her legs. Hu Jinyao's eyes were still staring at her, and there seemed to be a faint spark in his eyes. When she took off her pajamas, the spark in his eyes turned into flames. Su Qingsang felt a little thirsty. She let the pajamas slide to the ground and finally put on the small piece of cloth with trembling hands. Her movements weren't fast, but being stared at by him, even if he was her husband and they had been intimate so many times, still made her feel embarrassed. Hu Jinyao watched Su Qingsang put on the bikini, and the flames in his eyes turned into flames. Su Qingsang tied the strap behind her, only to find that Hu Jinyao had been staring at her. She suddenly had a feeling that she didn't know where to put her hands and feet. She couldn't help but take a step back, and her body hit the door of the wardrobe behind her. Hu Jinyao took a step forward and stood still. He stared at her face and his eyes were burning. I've already put it on for you to see. Su Qingsang's voice was a little hoarse. She blinked and wanted to move aside. "Excuse me, I'm going to sleep." Hu Jingyao was like a big bad wolf staring at a little white rabbit, and his eyes were almost glowing red. How could he let her go like this? "Honey." He put one hand on the side of her neck, and his tall body made it impossible for her to hide. "Did you want Zhang Yichen to see you like this today? Why did he beat Zhang Yichen up? Shouldn't he hide somewhere? Hide in the hot spring where Su Qingsang was? He really deserved a beating. I told you it was an accident." It was an accident, but when he thought of Zhang Yichen looking at Su Qingsang's seductive face, he felt a little uncomfortable. Of course he trusted Zhang Yichen's character. He came from the army and he was a man of integrity. He had heard from his great-aunt that a new female soldier who had just joined the army had a crush on Zhang Yichen. The sky was swaying in front of Zhang Yichen. However, Zhang Yichen didn't move. Later, that female soldier somehow got the courage to walk up to Zhang Yichen and take off her clothes, trying to make it a reality. However, Zhang Yichen ignored the female soldier's attempt to throw herself into his arms and directly threw her out of the room. Of course, when he threw her out, he still cared about her face and threw her clothes out. Although the female soldier hurriedly put on her clothes, she still couldn't suppress the matter. Later, that female soldier was transferred away. Maybe she was directly discharged from the army. Zhang Yichen had been in this kind of situation many times. In addition, in the past few years he seemed to be focused on building his career, and he didn't care much about women. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in his 30s without a girlfriend and didn't want to get married. As Hu Jinyao was thinking about this, his eyes fell on Su Qingsang's chest. He suddenly felt his throat tighten. How could those mediocre women be compared to Su Qingsang? Su Qingsang was Su Qingsang and those people were those people. Lowering his head, he bit down on her lips, neither too lightly nor too heavily. Su Qingsang felt the pain and let out a moan. To Hu Jinyao, this moan was like pouring oil on the fire in his eyes. Right on the wardrobe door, he pressed her body down and kissed her hard. Su Qingsang's back was against the wardrobe door and she only felt cold. She was afraid of the cold, so she held Hu Jinyao with both hands and tried to move forward a little. Hu Jinyao narrowed his eyes and picked her up. She looked like she was throwing herself into his arms. The moment her body was in the air, Su Qingsang was so scared that she held Hu Jinyao's neck tightly. Hu Jinyao stared at her snow-white breasts in front of him, and his eyes darkened. Against her neck, he said in a nasal voice, "Wife, you are mine." Her body, and everything about her belonged to him. He didn't want any other man to touch her. Even if that man was his uncle, it was the same. Hu Jinyao looked at Yang Wenchang in front of him and narrowed his eyes. "What did you say?" "Yi Shenyao, the daughter of the He family, came to the company yesterday." "Who agreed?" "It wasn't me." Yang Wenchang was afraid that Hu Jinyao would think of him. "The chairman arranged it." "My father?" "Yes." Yang Wenchang looked at Hu Jinyao's face and said carefully, "She was arranged to replace Zhang Yang, but I didn't agree. Later she said she would go to the marketing department. We let her go." "She said she would go to the marketing department and you let her go?" Hu Jinyao raised his eyebrows, his eyes sharp. Yang Wenchang lowered his head again, and his eyes were full of guilt. "Well, the chairman." Hu Jinyao didn't say anything. This was not Hu Mingguang's idea, but Lu Tongjia's. "It's okay. She wants to stay in the marketing department, right? It's okay. Starting tomorrow, let her work with old Zhang in the marketing department. Whatever old Zhang does, we'll do it together with her." Yang Wenchang's eyes lit up. His boss had made a smart move. "President Hua, why didn't I think of this before? Do you think that the one who came is an ancestor and we have to worship her?" Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang had worked together for many years and had a tacit understanding. However, Yang Wenchang had to listen to Hu Mingguang sometimes. After all, Hu Mingguang was the chairman. Hu Jinyao understood Yang Wenchang's position, but he wouldn't let it go. Chapter 507. Hu Jinyao's voice sounded deliberate. He had already decided to forget about He Shenyao setting him up. Since she was so blind and wanted to come looking for trouble, Lin Fan thought to himself. She shouldn't blame him for making her unhappy. "Yes." Yang Wenchang nodded. He looked like he was watching a good show. Originally he wanted to leave, but he suddenly thought of something else. "President Hua, there's something I think I should tell you. About the Ike's case." "Yes." "The case has been going well, but there seems to be a problem with the signing. The signing has been delayed for a few days. Normally the contract should have been signed by now. With Hui Yifun's ability, it shouldn't have been delayed for so long." Yang Wenchang began to feel that something was wrong. What's the problem? Hu Jinyao looked at Yang Wenchang. Before he could ask him to clarify the problem, Yang Wenchang's phone rang. He glanced at Hu Jinyao. It's Micah, the representative from Ike's. Meeting Hu Jinyao's eyes, he quickly picked up the phone. He looked at Hu Jinyao and spoke to the other party in English while putting the phone on speaker. Hu Jinyao could hear the voice on the other end of the phone clearly. Micah wanted to meet him? Yang Wenchang signaled with his eyes whether he could agree or not. Hu Jinyao shook his head. Yang Wenchang understood immediately. He told the other party that Hu Jinyao wouldn't be free for the next 2 days. As for when they could meet, it would depend on when Hu Jinyao was free. After hanging up, Yang Wenchang looked confused. President Hua, what do you think is going on with Hu Yifan? He had worked for Hu Jinyao for many years. Naturally, he knew that Hu Yifan didn't get along with Hu Jinyao. As for why he didn't want to replace him, it was because he didn't want Hu Jinyao to be the president. Don't worry about him. If Micah wants to meet me again, say yes. Okay. Yang Wenchang understood. What about Hu Yifan? Ignore him. As long as Micah made a move, Hu Yifan wouldn't be able to sit still. Yang Wenchang would know what Micah wanted. Yes. Yang Wenchang picked up the documents and was about to leave when he remembered one last thing. By the way, President Hua, the temporary replacement for Zhang Yang, has passed the interview. Her name is Ding Qin, and she's a top student at T University. She started working today. You deal with these matters. There's no need to tell me. Yang Wenchang responded and left. Hu Jinyao was lost in thought. Based on Hu Yifan's cunning, even if he couldn't get Ike's deal in the shortest time possible, he wouldn't have dragged it on for so long. More importantly, there was no way IX would come back to him. After all, if he couldn't complete this project well, his position in the Tianyu group would be awkward in the end. Even Hua Mingguang couldn't say anything. Was Hu Yifan really that stupid? Or did he have other tricks up his sleeve? No matter which one it was, he wasn't afraid. He would just deal with it as it came. There was another knock on the door. Hu Jinyao looked unhappy. The person who came was Su Qingsang. This was her first time visiting the Tianyu group in Rong City. If she hadn't met Yang Wenchang just now, she wouldn't have been able to come up. After all, she was the wife of the president of the Tianyu group. Many people had only heard of her but never met her. Why are you here? Seeing Su Qingsang, Hu Jinyao stood up to greet her. Mengwan and I happened to be shopping nearby, so I thought I'd come to see you. What? So you came to see me on the way? Hu Jinyao raised his hand to cover his chest, looking hurt. Honey, I'm hurt. Seeing him like this, Su Qingsang wanted to laugh. She raised the small box in her hand and said, Since you're hurt, I guess you can't have dessert, right? Can I give it to someone else? No. His wife bought it for him. Even if he didn't like sweets, he couldn't let it fall into someone else's hands. Hu Jinyao took the box from her hand and put it on the coffee table. He put it on the coffee table and said, Hey, didn't you say you came with Shi Mengwan? Where is she? She went to the bathroom. She had never been to Hu Jinyao's workplace, so she brought Shi Mengwan here. Good timing. Let's have dinner together tonight. Hu Jinyao received a call from Wan Xianying today. Xianying said he wants to treat you to dinner. Treating me is fake. It's Mengwan, right? Su Qingsang blinked. Did he think she didn't know what Wan Xianying was thinking? Then will you do me the honor? I will, but it's really impossible for him and Mengwan to be together. Su Qingsang had already asked Shi Mengwan today, and she didn't mean that. Besides, she's leaving tomorrow. Leaving tomorrow? Why don't you stay for a few more days? I have to work and I can't be with her every day. She also has things to do in Lin City. So she and Xianying are destined not to be together. As Su Qingsang spoke, her phone rang. Shi Mengwan was already ready and waiting for her downstairs. I'll leave first. Let's talk about dinner later. Since it was impossible for them to be together, it was better not to give him hope. When Su Qingsang left, she pointed at the snacks on the coffee table and blew a kiss at Hu Jinyao. Seeing his eyes suddenly become deep, she immediately became timid and quickly walked out. Su Qingsang walked out of the office. Before she reached the elevator, she saw a beautiful woman walking toward her. She was a real beauty. She was about 170 centimeters tall, had a slim figure, a voluptuous body, beautiful facial features, and exquisite makeup. She was wearing a pair of Gucci high heels and a Chanel business suit. She didn't have a special concept of brands. However, she happened to see the woman in front of her in a magazine when she went to the spa a few days ago. Su Qingsang blinked. There was such a beauty in Hu Jinyao's office. How good were the benefits of Tianyu Group? The woman was holding a stack of documents in her hand. She looked like a standard elite office woman. She was looking at the woman and the woman was looking at her. Su Qingsang wanted to go out with Shi Mengwan. She came out in sportswear. She looked casual and casual. Although Su Qingsang didn't feel that she was inferior to the woman in front of her, she felt that she lacked a sense of formality and solemnity. Su Qingsang also felt strange when she realized her own mentality. What was even stranger was that Su Qingsang didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to see a flash of contempt in the woman's eyes. She wanted to see it clearly, but the woman curled the corners of her lips and smiled at her. She didn't speak but took the stack of documents, walked past her and walked toward Hu Jinyao's office. Chapter 508. Su Qingsang suddenly turned to look at her. She still had a faint smile on her lips. Before Su Qingsang could say anything, she waved the folder in her hand and went straight into Hu Jinyao's office. Before entering the door, the moment she pushed it open, she turned to look at Su Qingsang. When their eyes met, she silently said 4 words. "Open the door and close it." Just like that, the graceful figure disappeared behind the door. Su Qingsang's expression became a little strange. It was her first time in Hu Jinyao's office. When Yang Wenchang took her upstairs just now, they took the elevator for the president. She didn't meet anyone, so how did this woman know her identity? "Qingsang? What's wrong?" Shi Mengwan's words brought her back to reality. Only then did she realize that she had already left the building of Tianyu Group and had already reached the parking lot. "Nothing." Su Qingsang shook her head. Thinking of the last few words that her daughter had uttered, she suddenly felt a sense of provocation. Who was that woman? What did she mean by those words? "Tieske, I know you and Hu Jinyao are very loving. You don't have to look like this when you leave him, do you? After all, you two are together every day now." Shi Mengwan was quite dissatisfied with her absent-mindedness. "I haven't even gone up and let you two be alone. Why are you still so reluctant to leave? I'm so jealous." "What are you talking about?" Su Qingsang was amused by her words. "It's not that I can't bear to leave him. I just remembered that Hu Jinyao doesn't seem to like desserts. In the end, I sent 2 boxes of desserts up." She had been shopping with Shi Mengwan and happened to walk near the dessert shop, so she bought desserts. Later, she remembered that she had gone out to eat with Hu Jinyao a few times, and she had never seen him eat desserts at the Huo family. "You're a little incompetent as a wife." Shi Mengwan's words were teasing. "You don't even know what your husband likes to eat?" "Who said that?" "I know. I just forgot." Su Qingsang blushed a little. She had really forgotten about it because she was shopping. "I think you should be more careful in the future. Otherwise, your husband is so handsome and has such a high status. If a girl comes and snatches him away one day, you won't even have a place to cry." "Screw you. My Jinyao wouldn't do that." Su Qingsang was sure, but she couldn't help but think of the woman she had just seen upstairs. Somehow, she felt a little uncomfortable in her heart. "My Jinyao. Tieske, your words are so sour." Shi Mengwan's voice brought her back to her senses. She shook off that thought. She believed in Hu Jinyao's character. He would never betray his love and marriage. Inexplicably, this was what she believed. With such confidence, she didn't ask Hu Jinyao who the woman was that night. There was no need to ask and there was no need to know. Since she chose to trust him, there was no need for her to ask anything else. Because Shi Mengwan was about to leave, she slept with Shi Mengwan that night. As for Hu Jinyao's dark expression, she instinctively ignored it. The next day, Su Qingsang sent Shi Mengwan off, returned to the hospital, and continued to do what she was supposed to do. The courtyard became busy. For a few days, it was as if a wave of people were rushing to give birth. Every day they had to receive a large number of pregnant women. The ward was almost full. Not only were they busy, but there were also a few pregnant women who weren't in good condition, so they had to pay attention to them from time to time. Not to mention her, even Zheng Qinyu was very busy. Some pregnant women were picky and said that they didn't want male doctors, but when there were no doctors, male doctors were also useful. Under such circumstances, when the next weekend came, Su Qingsang naturally didn't go back to the Huo family. She could only call old Master Hua and tell him that she had to be on duty this weekend, so she might not be able to see him. Old Master Hua was very understanding about his granddaughter-in-law's work. He didn't say much but just told her to work hard. Hu Jinyao looked at Micah who was sitting in front of him. Next to him was his secretary Vera. This time Hu Jinyao brought Yang Wenchang with him. They had been sitting for 20 minutes. Micah didn't open the door but Hu Jinyao was calm. He was leisurely drinking the tea in front of him. "The tea is good." Hua Jinyao glanced at Yang Wenchang, who was sitting next to him, with appreciation. Try it. His attitude was a little frivolous. Micah was angry, but he didn't show it on his face. President Hua, you still have the leisure to drink tea? I thought you wouldn't even be able to eat now. Why would I? Hua Jinyao smiled. Why would I not be able to eat? President Hua. Micah thought that Hua Jinyao was pretending. In his opinion, how could Hua Jinyao not care about it at all? That was impossible. You were the one who talked to me about the cooperation between our two companies. Why is it Mr. Hua Yifan now? No matter who I talk to, the final result is the cooperation with Tianyu Group. I don't see the difference. Of course there is a difference. Micah looked at Hua Jinyao as if feeling sorry for him. President Hua, we had a good talk before. I thought you were willing to cooperate with me. Yes. Tianyu Group is willing to cooperate with Ike's at any time. Hua Jinyao was talking about the two companies, but Micah was talking about the two of them. Micah wasn't stupid. Of course he understood. President Hua, I don't think you are willing to give such a big piece of the cake to your brother. You said it yourself, he is my brother. If that's the case, why do we have to be separate? But Tianyu Group should be yours. Micah looked sad. Isn't it? Mr. Micah, please be careful. Tianyu Group belongs to the Hua family. But without your father, the Hua family wouldn't be where it is now. Hua Jinyao didn't deny this. Why could Hua Mingguang become the chairman, while Hua Mingliang could only be a director, which was an idle job? When Tianyu Group was first established, it couldn't be on such a scale. Although Old Master Hua was ruthless, he only made Tianyu Group the largest in Rong City. After Hua Mingguang took over, he expanded the business to other cities in the country. He also laid the foundation for Tianyu Group to become a multinational company. After that, Hua Jinyao took over. After he took over, he made a series of measures to make Tianyu Group stronger. Hua Jinyao understood what Micah meant. Seriously speaking, he and Hua Mingguang should be the only ones in Tianyu Group. Of course it was the same now. However, after Hua Yifan graduated from school and entered Tianyu Group, he started to have more thoughts with Hua Yang and Hua Yifan. They did a lot of small things, but Hua Mingguang tolerated them all. Because of this, Hua Jinyao had a lot of troubles. Mr. Micah, what are you trying to say? Just say it. If you want to sow discord between me and my brother, you don't have to. In some ways I trust him. Even if he didn't trust him, it was the Hua family's business. He wouldn't show it in front of Micah, a collaborator, or a foreigner. Mr. Hua, I can't be compared to you. Micah sighed. He seemed to be helpless about Hua Jinyao's words. Mr. Hua, I sincerely want to cooperate with you, but I know some small things. I think Mr. Hua will be very interested in them. Micah didn't beat around the bush. He got to the point. Hua Jinyao looked at him. Because of what Micah said next, his expression finally changed. It was rare that Su Qingsang didn't have to be on duty or stay in the hospital. She bought some bird food to feed the parrot, then bought 2 boxes of tea to visit Old Master Hua. She had heard from Hua Jinyao that Old Master Hua loved tea. The Hua family must have good tea. They had a lot of special tea. But the tea she gave him would be different. It was an apology for not having time to visit Old Master Hua. Old Master Hua was really nice to her and trusted her. Su Qingsang was very grateful. If she could, she would like to spend more time with Old Master Hua. However, when Su Qingsang arrived at the Hua family's house, she found that Old Master Hua had gone out to see an old friend. He would come back later. As for how late, Uncle Qing didn't know if he would come back for dinner. Su Qingsang finally decided to visit the parrot before going home. Old Master Hua wasn't there, so Su Qingsang couldn't stay. The main thing was that if she ran into Lu Tongjia later, they wouldn't quarrel, but they never had a good conversation when they met. Therefore she didn't want to be impulsive. Su Qingsang stood under the eaves in the backyard. Rong City was getting warmer. The temperature wasn't high, but at least it wasn't as cold as before. The parrot seemed to be very happy to see her and kept squawking. But even if it was happy, the parrot had to express its dissatisfaction. Bastard, don't look at me. Bastard, ignore me. Su Qingsang was so angry that she wanted to laugh. It was the bird who had been cold and ignored her no matter how she called. Why was she ignoring it now? What was even funnier was that it was complaining, but it still scolded her. I think you shouldn't be called jadeite. Change it to rascal. You like scolding people so much. Rascal, you rascal. Rascal. You rascal. The parrot scolded her again. Su Qingsang really laughed. Why was the bird getting addicted to scolding her? Su Qingsang rarely got playful. She glared at the bird in front of her fiercely. You're having fun, aren't you? Believe it or not, I'll pluck all your feathers, kill you and eat you. Bad guy, bad guy. The parrot squawked even louder. Boss, help. Bad guy. He wants to eat me. Boss, help. Help? Ha ha ha. Su Qingsang couldn't help but laugh out loud. She was overjoyed. The bird was so funny. She didn't laugh for long before she heard low laughter behind her. Chapter 509. Uncle? Su Qingsang blinked and looked at the person in front of her. She found that she had been seeing Zhang Yichen more often recently. But it didn't seem to be a coincidence. After all, the Hua family was Zhang Yichen's uncle's home. He could come and go as he pleased without any scruples. Zhang Yichen looked at Su Qingsang and responded to the word, uncle, in a very casual tone. He seemed to be smiling just now. The corners of his mouth were still curled up, with a faint, shallow smile. Su Qingsang wasn't sure how much of her conversation with the parrot he had heard. Somehow she felt a little embarrassed. It seemed that whenever she appeared in front of him, she wouldn't look good. Uncle, are you here for Grandpa? Grandpa went out. He's not home. I know. Zhang Yichen was here for old Master Hua. He didn't know until later that Su Qingsang and Hua Jinyao only came to the Hua family's house on weekends. He wanted to avoid Su Qingsang when she came. Unexpectedly, he didn't manage to avoid her. He didn't expect Su Qingsang to be at home. Not only was she at home, but she was also playing with the parrot in the backyard. When she smiled, there was a hint of innocence and frankness in it. She didn't have the arrogance that other girls in Rong City had. She looked as cute as a girl next door. But he knew that was only one side of her. She had many other sides. She was cunning when she was trying to blackmail the family members, and she was serious when she was stitching up people's wounds. And she was arrogant and aggressive when she was facing that man's subordinates. The last thing that flashed through his mind was Su Qingsang's smooth shoulders that were half exposed when she was soaking in the hot spring, and her jade-like skin. Realizing what he was thinking, he put on a serious expression, and the smile on his face faded a little. He looked so serious that Su Qingsang thought he didn't want to see her. Well, she was the one who saw him hiding in the closet in a sorry state. Then, uncle, please help yourself. I'm leaving. She was about to walk into the house when Zhang Yichen suddenly stopped her when she was about to walk past him. Don't move. Su Qingsang was startled and subconsciously glanced at him. Zhang Yichen realized that his tone was too stiff. He lowered his voice uncomfortably and said, "There's something dirty." "Where?" "Don't move." Zhang Yichen raised his hand and gently plucked a feather out of her hair. She looked at him with hidden eagerness in her eyes. However, the corners of his lips were tightly pursed. That was the result of him trying his best to restrain himself. Su Qingsang didn't see the look on Zhang Yichen's face. When he brought the feather to her, she lowered her head and said, "Thank you." The corners of Zhang Yichen's mouth were cold and stiff. Even his voice was lower. "No need." Su Qingsang didn't stay long because of his cold attitude. She left as fast as she could. Zhang Yichen stood there without moving. After Su Qingsang left, the expression on his face relaxed a little. He closed his eyes and sniffed. There was still the faint fragrance of Su Qingsang in the air. Zhang Yichen abruptly opened his eyes and looked at a spot in the garden. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but he keenly sensed that someone was spying on him just now. The feeling of being watched was very obvious. If he hadn't been distracted just now, he would have realized it. Zhang Yichen's expression was serious. He stared in that direction for a long time, but the feeling disappeared. His face darkened slightly. He suddenly realized that he had been too careless. He should have been more careful not to let anyone see anything. After all, he could restrain that little bit of lustful thoughts. But was it really just a little bit? They had only met a few times and they had only interacted for a short time. But he couldn't help but think about it. If only she wasn't Hua Jinyao's wife. If only she hadn't gotten married so early. He even thought that if the person she married was him, would she also show such a gentle smile in front of him, with a tinge of shyness? Closing his eyes, Zhang Yichen suppressed this crazy thought in time. He clenched his fists so tightly that the veins on the back of his hands were bulging. He couldn't think about it anymore. If someone found out about it, it wouldn't end well for him and Su Qingsang. Zhang Yichen glanced at the place again, thinking about the possibility of who was there. Finally he turned and left. When Su Qingsang got home, she found that Hua Jinyao had come home earlier than her. She was a little surprised. Ms. Yu was cooking in the kitchen, while Hua Jinyao was sitting on a chair on the balcony. It was so cold outside, but he didn't come in. He didn't notice that she was back. Su Qingsang frowned, put down the things, changed her shoes and walked out. "Jinyao." Hua Jinyao turned around and smiled when he saw Su Qingsang. You're back. Su Qingsang blinked and looked at him. The lights on the balcony were off. She seemed to have seen a flash of gloominess in Hu Jinyao's eyes. But now, he was only looking at her with a faint smile, as if that emotion just now was her illusion. Are you okay? I'm fine. Why did you come out here to stand in the cold wind alone? The heating in Rong City hadn't been turned off yet, so it was very cold outside. She felt cold even standing there, not to mention how long he had been standing in the cold wind. Su Qingsang suddenly reached out and held his hand. She found that his hand was not as warm as it used to be. Instead, it was ice cold. Su Qingsang glared at him. Hu Jinyao, you call this okay? The concern in her eyes was real. Hu Jinyao looked at her and suddenly reached out to pull her into his arms. Su Qingsang was stunned for a second, then hugged him with both hands around his waist. His clothes were cold from the wind. She leaned her face against it, feeling a little uncomfortable from the coldness. Hu Jinyao. She didn't look up but slightly tightened her arms. I'm your wife. You can tell me if you need anything. Yes. Maybe I can't help you with your business. I can't even help you with other things. But at least I can listen. Su Qingsang's voice was very soft, but it sounded in the dark night. Hu Jinyao was still silent. He couldn't say it. He looked at Su Qingsang and thought about what Micah said in the afternoon. He couldn't say it. He couldn't tell Su Qingsang that his mother, his father, his cousin, and his uncle, almost everyone didn't want him to live well. Hu Jinyao closed his eyes and rested his chin on the top of Su Qingsang's head. There was a light fragrance in her hair, and he felt that the smell was very comfortable. Her body was very soft. Compared to his figure, it was delicate and soft. Hugging her in his arms, it made his heart soften. Chapter 5:10. Su Qingsang looked up at him with her clear eyes. If there was moonlight, he could see his shadow in her eyes. But even without moonlight, Hu Jinyao knew that her eyes were full of him. His heart moved slightly, but he didn't respond to her words. Hu Jinyao, if you don't want to tell me, I won't ask. But I hope you understand. We are husband and wife. Since we are husband and wife, we are one. You can try talking to me too. He tried to trust her and tell her about his troubles. She might not be able to help. But at least there was someone to share his worries with and listen to him. Hu Jinyao's response was to reach out and hug her tightly. Ms. Yu's voice came from inside. Dinner was ready. Su Qingsang patted Hu Jinyao's back and said, Let's go. Let's go eat. Hu Jinyao let go of her and looked at Su Qingsang's beautiful face. He lowered his head and planted a light kiss on her forehead. Don't worry. I'm fine. Su Qingsang didn't believe him, but since he said so, she could only believe him. She felt a little disappointed in her heart that she didn't even know about. She was almost a blank piece of paper in front of him. Whether it was her family background or her thoughts, everything was under his control. He knew everything clearly. But she felt that he still had secrets, things that he didn't want to share with her. That didn't feel good. She thought that maybe he really didn't want to tell her because of work, or maybe because she wouldn't understand even if he told her. That little bit of discomfort was suppressed in a corner of her heart and became a small seed. Hu Jinyao looked at the documents handed to him by the person in front of him and glanced at her. Ding Qing, the new female secretary, was here to replace Zhang Yang. She graduated from MIT, had a good education background and had a very good resume. Such a talent came to Tianyu Group as a secretary. It didn't mean that Tianyu Group's secretaries were bad. It was because with Ding Qing's resume she could get a better position. However, Hu Jinyao later watched the video of her interview and the reason why she came to apply for the job. According to her, her mother had been in poor health recently, so she wanted to come back and spend more time with her. Another reason was that Hu Jinyao had worked with the company she used to work for. She liked the way Hu Jinyao's company did things, and she hoped to learn new things from Tianyu Group. She had been in the company for more than a week, and her performance was indeed quite outstanding. Not only was she able to do the things that Yang Wenchang arranged for her, but there were also some things that she could do well even without his arrangement. Usually Hu Jinyao didn't use female secretaries. However, Ding Qing was indeed very capable. Therefore, 1 week was enough for him to change his mind about replacing her. Ding Qing stood there looking a little nervous. He looked at Hu Jinyao with uncertainty in his eyes. President Hua, are the documents all right? No. Hu Jinyao withdrew his gaze, signed the document and handed it to her. Zhang Yang will go on vacation in 2 days. Tell him to hand over the rest of the work to you. Yes, I know. Zhang Yang has told me what to do. Ding Qing smiled and held the document in her hands in front of her chest. It seemed that the document was a little lower than her chest. Because of that, the two lumps in her chest seemed to be completely squeezed together. Hu Jingyao didn't see that, but Ding Qing looked at Hu Jinyao's eyes with concern. President Hua, you don't look so good. Did you not sleep well yesterday? Do you want me to make you a cup of coffee? Sure. Hu Jingyao did not sleep well yesterday. He didn't know if it was because of what Micah said, but he had been having nightmares these days. He rubbed between his eyebrows and signaled Ding Qing to leave. A few minutes after Ding Qing left, she came back with a cup of coffee in her hand. There was a small piece of cake on top of it. President Hua, I don't think it's good to drink coffee on an empty stomach. Have a piece of cake. Hu Jingyao glanced at Ding Qing. Her eyes were very calm. President Hua, take care of yourself. I'm still waiting to learn from you. Hu Jingyao looked at her calmness and didn't think much of it. Thank you. But I don't like cake. Oh really? Ding Qing seemed to be very upset. I saw a box of desserts in your office last time. My wife bought it. What he meant was obvious. Since Su Qingsang bought it, even if she didn't like it, she had to eat it. And Ding Qing wasn't qualified. Ding Qing wasn't mad at all, even though it was a very direct sentence. Instead, she stuck out her tongue. I'm sorry, President Hua. I didn't know. It's okay. You can take it out. Hu Jingyao lowered his head and focused on the document in front of him. Ding Qing picked up the piece of cake. The look on her face seemed to be still upset and blaming herself for her mistake. However, when she turned around, the regret in her eyes suddenly disappeared. Was he eating it because his wife bought it? She would like to see if Hu Jingyao would eat it when she brought it to his office again. Hu Jingyao came out of the shower with a towel on his head. He casually dried his hair with the towel, then sat in front of the dressing table, waiting for Su Qingsang to dry his hair for him. However, he was about to be disappointed. Su Qingsang was video chatting with Li Qianxue. After all this time, Li Qianxue's company had stabilized. She also found a professional manager to help her. Now that the company was stable, she looked much better. At the moment, she was talking to Su Qingsang about Old Master Li's birthday. Old Master Li's birthday was on the 3rd of next month. It was not many days away. Although it wasn't a birthday celebration. Old Master Li had just reunited with his granddaughter, and he hoped that Su Qingsang could come home to celebrate his birthday. However, even if Old Master Li wanted to, he didn't want to add to Su Qingsang's troubles. So, he could only talk about it in front of Li Qianxue. Li Qianxue found it funny but also sad. Her daughter had never been taken care of for even a day. When she reunited with her granddaughter, she was married to a place so far away. I know you're busy with work, but your grandpa really wants you to come home. Qingsang, can you arrange it? Li Qianxue was a little careful with her words. She was really afraid that Su Qingsang wouldn't be willing. Speaking of which, during this period of time, the relationship between mother and daughter had improved a lot, but she still often worried that her daughter would choose to resent her because of the previous 20 years of neglect. Even though she knew that Su Qingsang wasn't that kind of person, some thoughts couldn't be suppressed. Mom, what are you talking about? Of course I have to come back for Grandpa's birthday. In the past, when she wasn't the granddaughter of the Li family, she would appear on Old Master Li's birthday, not to mention now that she was Old Master Li's biological granddaughter. Really? Okay, then I'll talk to your grandpa. The smile on Li Qianxue's face became a little more sincere. Su Qingsang also felt very happy. She actually missed Li Qianxue very much, although they could video chat every day and talk on the phone. But seeing her in person was still different from seeing her on video. Okay. You tell Grandpa that I will definitely come back. Then let Jingyao come back together. It was not right for her grandson-in-law to not be there. Okay, I'll tell him. Su Qingsang finished speaking, but there was one thing she didn't say. That was, what about Su Qinghui? Should he go back? However, looking at Li Qianxue's happy face, she didn't mention Su Qinghui in the end to make Li Qianxue unhappy. After ending the call, she saw Hu Jingyao sitting in the back. His hair was slightly wet and his expression was a little sad. Hey, you took a shower? Then I'll go take a shower. Su Qingsang put down her phone and was about to get up, but Hu Jingyao grabbed her hand. Honey, help me dry my hair. Su Qingsang glanced at him, took the hairdryer from the side, and began to dry his hair for him. She also told him that she was going back to Lin City next month. Although it was next month, it was actually almost next week. It's Grandpa's birthday, so of course we have to go back. After Hu Jingyao finished speaking, as if he suddenly thought of something, he said, there are a lot of things to do in the company recently. I'll make some arrangements and go back with you when the time comes. Thank you. You're so nice. Su Qingsang was very happy. She was so happy that she bent down to kiss Hu Jinyao's face. For a moment she forgot that she still had the hairdryer in her hand. Ugh! Hu Jinyao groaned in pain. Only then did she realize that she had hurt him. Are you okay? Let me see. Where are you hurt? Hu Jinyao put her on his lap and turned off the hairdryer. Seeing the worried look on her face, he leaned over and kissed her on the lips. You're sad. You were so happy when you talked about going back to Lin City. I'm hurt. I need you to comfort me. Su Qingsang looked at his playful face and said, How do you want me to comfort you? What do you think? Hu Jinyao put his arm around her waist, looked at her tender red lips and kissed them hard. Every day after Hu Jinyao went into the company, Ding Qing was responsible for telling him about his schedule for the day. Today Hu Jinyao didn't ask her to leave as he usually did. Book 2 tickets for me on the second flight to Lin City. In the past, Zhang Yang had been the one to do all these things. After saying that, he noticed that Ding Qing was standing still and looking up at him. What's wrong? Is there a problem? No problem. Ding Qing nodded. President Hua, are you going to Lin City with Assistant Yang on a business trip? No. I'm going to Lin City with my wife. Ding Qing's hand that was holding the pen slightly tightened, but she smiled and nodded. Okay, I'll go now. Hu Jinyao thought that Su Qingsang would want to see Li Qianxue as soon as possible, so he asked Ding Qing to book the tickets for the morning. He waved his hand and let her go. After Ding Qing went back to her office, she didn't hurry to book the tickets. Instead, she took out her phone and dialed a few numbers. President Hua is going to Lin City on the 2nd of next month. She told Ding Qing what she had heard. She didn't know what the other side of the phone said, but a bright smile appeared on her face. Chapter 5:11. After saying that, she kept listening to the man's voice. The smile on her face never faded. Okay, I got it. I'll be careful. Don't worry. He doesn't suspect me for now. If you don't believe me, you can do it yourself. When Ding Qing smiled, there was a hint of playfulness in her eyes. More than that, she was confident. After hanging up, Ding Qing held the phone in her hand and spun it in a circle. She fixed her eyes on the desktop on the screen, which she had specially set up. It was Hu Jinyao's photo. Su Qingsang gave the leave request to Sun Huiya to sign. She was actually quite embarrassed. She had asked for leave several times in the past 2 months. She had been accompanying Shi Mingwan before, but this time she was going back to Lin City. Although it hadn't been long, she still felt embarrassed. It's okay. I know you're from Lin City. Sun Huiya understood her well. How about I give you one more day? You can come back to work on Tuesday. You can have a good rest then. Su Qingsang had been doing well since she came to the hospital. She had been very cooperative and good. Sun Huiya didn't mind taking care of her. That's great. Thank you, Director Sunday. After asking for leave, Su Qingsang started thinking about what she should buy for Old Master Li and Li Qianxue in Lin City after work. After all, her flight was tomorrow. She should ask Hu Jinyao. She had given Old Master Hua a parrot before, so she couldn't give him another parrot. She couldn't take it to Lin City either. She was still thinking about it. The emergency room downstairs sent a pregnant woman who had been in a car accident. Her condition was complicated. The emergency room said that Su Qingsang had seen this pregnant woman before, and the hospital had a record of it. Hearing that, Su Qingsang hurried forward. Su Qingsang looked at the woman. She looked familiar. Su Qingsang didn't remember who she was until the nurse brushed the woman's hair away from her face. Wasn't this the woman Li Hong who had tried to blackmail Zhang Yichen a month ago? This time the woman wasn't pretending. She was really hit by a car. Su Qingsang looked at the big pool of blood on her body and said, "Hurry, get ready for surgery." The driver who drove her here was obviously frightened. He kept explaining, "I didn't hit her. She rushed out on her own. I didn't have time to avoid her." Don't say anything. Now is not the time to blame anyone. We need to save people. Su Qingsang didn't have time to argue with this man. Li Hong was 6 months pregnant the last time she was here. Now she was 7 months pregnant. This was a good time but also not a good one. If they were lucky, the child could be saved. If they were unlucky, the child might not be born safely, and the pregnant woman might not even be able to keep her life. Su Qingsang didn't have the energy to deal with the car owner. She ordered the doctors to prepare the operating room and pushed Li Hong into the delivery room. At the same time, he instructed Li Meilin to make sure that the pregnant woman's family members signed the paperwork when they arrived. After explaining everything, Su Qingsang followed him into the operating room. When he really went in, he found that the situation was quite bad. Since Li Hong was hit by a car, her whole body was sent flying. Her uterus had ruptured and she was bleeding profusely. She had to get the baby out as soon as possible. Sun Huiya heard about the situation and quickly came over. Looking at Li Hong, who had fainted from the pain, Su Qingsang voiced her opinion. Director Sunday. The pregnant woman's uterus ruptured. We have to do the surgery as soon as possible. I know. In such a situation, the pregnant woman's uterus might not be able to be saved. They had to do everything they could to save the baby. Su Qingsang and Sun Huiya had been working together a lot lately. They both knew what the other was thinking. After the surgery and emergency treatment, Li Hong's baby was finally separated from the mother's body. The baby is in good condition. Send it to the incubator for observation. After making sure that the baby was fine, Su Qingsang and Sun Huiya started to do emergency treatment for Li Hong. Not only her, but 2 doctors from the surgery department also came to help. After the C-section, Sun Huiya checked the condition of the uterus and said with a serious face, Qingsang, I'm afraid her uterus can't be saved. The uterus was ruptured and bleeding profusely. It had to be removed. However, Sun Huiya had been a doctor for many years and had seen many cases. Li Hong had just given birth to a daughter. If Li Hong had a son before, it would be fine. What if it was her only child? It would be fine if the parents didn't value boys over girls. If the parents did, they would come to the hospital and cause a scene. Qingsang, you don't need to worry about this. You can go now. I'll take care of the rest. They had been working in the hospital for a long time and were considered senior staff. However, Su Qingsang was different. She had only been working in the hospital for less than 3 months. She was still in her internship. If the family of the patient caused a scene, the hospital wouldn't do anything to them. However, Su Qingsang wouldn't be able to escape. Director Sun, don't say anything. I won't leave. Let's finish the surgery first. She would be lying if she said she wasn't touched. She had been working in the hospital for less than 2 months. She was happy that Sun Huiya was so considerate of her. However, she didn't think she did anything wrong. The most important thing was that Li Hong's life was still in danger. If there was anything else, it could wait until Li Hong was saved. After 3 hours of emergency treatment, Li Hong's life was finally saved. When Su Qingsang walked out of the surgery room, Li Hong's family was already there. This time they didn't look as fierce as last time. The leader was Li Hong's husband. He looked anxious. Doctor, are my wife and son okay? Su Qingsang looked at the man in front of her. She raised her eyebrows slightly when she heard the word son. Your wife is fine. She just gave birth to a daughter for you. Both of them are safe now. What? Daughter? The anxious look on Li Hong's husband's face disappeared immediately. How can it be a daughter? I went to the master and he said it was a son. Su Qingsang wanted to say that Li Hong's uterus had been removed and she couldn't have a child anymore. However, before she could say anything, she was shocked by what Li Hong's husband did next. Damn it. The master said it was a son. How did it turn out to be a daughter? No, I'm going to get even with him. Su Qingsang wanted to ask the man to go check on Li Hong and her daughter. To her surprise, Li Hong's husband ran out of the hospital without looking back. She had been working in the hospital for many years and had seen a lot of things. However, Su Qingsang didn't expect something like this to happen. She thought about it carefully and found it reasonable. If Li Hong's husband was a good person, he wouldn't allow his pregnant wife to blackmail others. However, Su Qingsang didn't know what to do now. She turned around and looked at Li Meilin. Take the pregnant woman back to the ward. Find 2 volunteers to take care of her. Li Hong's husband didn't look like he would take care of his wife. I know. Li Meilin nodded. Before she left, she looked at Su Qingsang worriedly. Dr. Su, I think I need to warn you. What? The pregnant woman's family is not to be trifled with. They still don't know that her uterus has been removed. They find out. Li Meilin didn't finish her sentence, but Su Qingsang understood what she meant. She patted Su Qingsang's shoulder. Don't worry. They signed it. They signed it. Plus, it was a critical situation. I had to do it. If they want to get even with me, I'll reason with them. If they didn't reason with her, she wouldn't be able to do anything about it. She could just go through the legal process. Su Qingsang's plan was simple. Li Meilin wanted to persuade her, but Su Qingsang had already signed the papers and organized the surgery records. Su Qingsang waited until she got off work, but Li Hong's husband didn't come back to the hospital. She had seen this kind of situation before and wasn't a stranger to it. However, she still felt a little uncomfortable. She couldn't suppress the discomfort until she got home. Li Hong had woken up in the hospital, but she didn't know what she would do if she found out that her husband was in such a state. "You're back? I came to see you." Su Qingsang's thoughts finally came to an end at the door. Not only did Hua Jinyao come back early today, but he also prepared the gifts she was going to give her tomorrow. "Come and have a look. This is for your mother, this is for Su Yusin, and this is for Grandpa. It's not a birthday gift. I've ordered a birthday gift for someone else. Send it directly to Lin City, and we'll bring it to the Li family the day after tomorrow." "What is it?" Su Qingsang looked at Hua Jinyao's proud face and asked curiously, "What did you prepare?" "I'm not telling you. Anyway, I can tell you. Grandpa will love it. It's not a parrot, is it? Do you think I'm like you?" Hua Jinyao raised his eyebrows slightly and said teasingly, "What's wrong with me?" Su Qingsang didn't think that she gave the wrong bird. That parrot was so smart. It could even quarrel with people. Unknowingly, it would make the Hua family more lively. Old Master Hua wouldn't be lonely because of it. How nice would that be? "How dare you say that my parrot is a bad gift?" Su Qingsang looked fierce. If Hua Jinyao said yes, she would fight him to the death. Hua Jinyao raised his hands and surrendered. "I was wrong. How could a gift from my wife be bad? Of course it's the best gift." "That's more like it." Su Qingsang smiled. Since Hua Jinyao had bought the gifts, she couldn't think of anything better. Moreover, she couldn't think of anything better, so naturally she gave the gift according to what Hua Jinyao had bought. After dinner, she packed up her belongings and put away the gifts. They had a home in Lin City, so they didn't need to bring too many things. It was just one suitcase for 2 people. Su Qingsang was happy when she thought that she could go back to Lin City tomorrow. She temporarily forgot about the episode in the hospital. The next day, Su Qingsang got up very early. Yang Wenchang came to the house early in the morning. He was responsible for driving Hua Jinyao and Su Qingsang to the hospital today. Chapter 512. Hua Jinyao hung up the phone and looked at Su Qingsang guiltily. "What's wrong?" Su Qingsang had a hunch when she saw his face. "There's an emergency at the company. I need to go back." Then. He wasn't going to Lin City with her? "You go first. I'll book a flight in the afternoon." Hua Jinyao wasn't sure either. His expression was a bit serious. "Okay." Looking at his expression, Su Qingsang thought for a moment, then added, "If you can't make it in time, then forget it. Business is more important." Hua Jinyao leaned over and kissed her on the cheek. "Don't worry. I'll deal with it as soon as possible." Of course, Su Qingsang believed him, but she had a bad feeling about it. Hua Jinyao drove Su Qingsang to the airport first. Then he left in a hurry. Su Qingsang looked at his back and suddenly felt a sense of emptiness in her heart. They had just parted. Why did she already start to miss him? Lin City. Li Qianxue was asking Xiaoyu and the others to redecorate Su Qingsang's room. The quilt and sheets had been exposed to the sun. She was still worried, so she looked at it again. Su Yusin stood next to her and watched Li Qianxue with a faint smile on his face. "Mom, you've forgotten about me as soon as my sister came back." "What are you talking about?" Li Qianxue turned and glared at him, but her eyes were full of joy. "She's alone in Rong City. Except for the old master, the rest of the Hua family doesn't seem easy to get along with. I'm worried about her." Especially when she thought of Lu Tongjia, Li Qianxue couldn't help but worry about Su Qingsang. She knew that Hua Jinyao was very good to Su Qingsang and that he would take good care of her. But to survive in a family like that, all she needed was her husband's love. However, Li Qianxue usually didn't show such worries in front of Su Qingsang. And Su Qingsang never talked about how the Hua family was in front of her. She knew very well that Su Qingsang didn't want her to worry. With Su Qingsang's personality, even if something happened, she probably wouldn't tell her. "Don't worry. I think big sister is very smart, she won't let herself be taken advantage of." Su Yusin had a deeper understanding of Su Qingsang after this interaction. He looked quiet, but he had his own plans. The Hua family might not be able to bully her. After all, Su Qingsang wasn't a little white rabbit. "Of course. Don't you know whose daughter she is?" When Li Qianxue said this, there was a hint of pride on her face. Seeing the happiness on her face, Su Yusin really didn't want to spoil her mood, but there were some things that had to be said. "Mom, Grandpa's birthday. Do you think Sister Peixian?" At the mention of Su Peixian, Li Qianxue's face darkened. Although she didn't allow Su Peixian to stay in the Su family in a moment of impulse, Li Qianxue didn't think that she had chased Su Peixian out, nor did she really want to cut off all ties with her. After all, she had raised Su Peixian for more than 20 years. It would be a lie to say that she had no feelings for Su Peixian. But look at Su Peijian's behavior. Ever since she left the Su family, she hadn't even called her once, let alone visited her. No matter what, she was still her adoptive mother, right? After more than 20 years of affection, Su Peijian could be so cold-blooded. Should she, as an elder, take the initiative to contact Su Peijian? Li Qianxue couldn't do such a thing. She was also a person with her own pride. If Su Peijian didn't treat her as a mother, why should she treat her as a daughter? If Sister Peijian comes to celebrate Grandpa's birthday, then if she comes, she will naturally still be a daughter of the Su family. She would be a daughter of the Su family but not her daughter. After all, old Master Li had doted on Su Peijian for so many years. If Su Peijian had a conscience, she would come tomorrow. However, if she really didn't come, then Li Qianxue really didn't want to recognize this daughter anymore. Su Yusin didn't speak. During this period he had actually tried to contact Su Peijian, but unfortunately, Su Peijian hadn't responded to him. She didn't pick up his calls and she didn't reply to his messages. He even sent her an email but he didn't get the slightest response. He knew that Su Peijian still couldn't accept the fact that she wasn't Li Qianxue's child. However, some things, since they had already happened, could only be accepted. If she continued to be like this, Su Yusin would actually feel very embarrassed. Because at the mention of Su Peijian, Li Qianxue noticed that Su Yusin's tone wasn't very good. However, soon she heard from Xiaoyu that Su Qingsang had arrived. Li Qianxue immediately smiled. She quickly went downstairs. Su Qingsang had told Li Qianxue her flight time before, and she had specially sent someone to pick Su Qingsang up. Now that she was back, old Master Li was very happy. However, he didn't forget to look behind her. Where's Jinyao? Grandpa, Jinyao has something to do at the company, but he promised me that he will fly over as soon as he is done. Su Qingsang didn't say when he would be busy. She had an intuition that this time, it wouldn't be so easy to solve. In fact, it wasn't that she didn't see that Hu Jinyao was acting strangely during this period. He obviously had more social engagements and spent more time on work. She could see the fatigue in his eyes, but she couldn't help him. It's okay. It's good that you're back. Old Master Li hadn't seen Su Qingsang for a while and really missed this granddaughter. He looked up and down and there was some dissatisfaction in his eyes. Why do you look thinner? Is it because you're too tired? Of course not. Su Qingsang pinched her arm as she spoke. I don't even know how much muscle has grown out and you still say that I've lost weight. I think you've lost weight. Li Qianxue came downstairs. When she saw Su Qingsang, she also felt that her daughter had lost weight. Is it because you're too tired from work? I don't think there's a time when you're not tired. In my opinion, you'd better change your job. It's really too hard to be a doctor. Mom, I'm already doing very well. It's considered easy. Look at the hospital's emergency department and surgery department. Which department wasn't busier than the obstetrics and gynecology department? How is it easy? Li Qianxue walked up to her daughter, took her hand and looked her up and down. I think you've lost weight. You don't have to be a doctor. Go to Hu Jinyao's company and get a free job as the young mistress of the Hu family. Mom? Su Qingsang was about to laugh. What can I do at his company? Bring tea and water to him? He wouldn't dare. Li Qianxue was very protective. My daughter isn't going to be his tea girl. Even if he's Hu Jinyao, he can't. Li Qianxue's eyes suddenly lit up. That's right. Why don't I open a branch office in Rong City? You can work at the branch office. She thought it was a good idea. Su Qingsang quickly dissuaded her. Mom, stop it. I'm not a business student. You said you'd open a company for me. What can I do if you really open a company? Then you'll just sit and watch others work. Mom. Su Qingsang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Why didn't she know that Li Qianxue had such a reckless side? Aren't you afraid that I'll make the company close down? So be it. We'll open another one then. Su Qingsang couldn't stand it anymore. Now she could really understand why Su Peijian used to be so arrogant. With such a doting attitude, it would be strange if the child didn't become unruly. Mom, don't worry. I'll definitely take good care of my body. These days there are indeed a little more things to do in the hospital. But don't worry, after this period it shouldn't be so busy. After all, the country had just allowed the second child not long ago. It was normal for the hospital to have a few more children. After this period, she believed that she wouldn't be so busy. That's what you said. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang, afraid that she was lying to her. When the time comes, if you don't gain some weight and gain some weight, I won't be satisfied. I promise. Su Qingsang raised her hand and saluted. Not only Li Qianxue but even old Master Li and Su Yusin laughed. Su Qingsang took out the gift that Hu Jinyao had prepared. What the gift was not important to old Master Li and the others at all. What was important was the intention of his granddaughter. The atmosphere of the family was quite harmonious and beautiful. In such an atmosphere, Su Qingsang put aside the little bit of melancholy that Hu Jinyao couldn't be with her all the time. On the other side, Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang returned to the company. They went upstairs, but before they could enter the office they were blocked by someone. He Xianyao and Ding Qing stood opposite each other. He Xianyao seemed to want to go to Hu Jinyao's office. Ding Qing was blocking He Xuanyao's way. "I told you President Hua isn't here today. I don't believe you. I heard you on the phone just now. Didn't he say that he would be back soon? It's been so long. He should be back, right? President Hua really didn't come back. You." Before Ding Qing could finish, Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang arrived. Seeing that it was him, He Xianyao gave Ding Qing a hateful glare, then rushed up to him. Hu Jinyao. She might be really angry because her tone wasn't very nice. Not only did she not call him President Hua, but she also didn't call him Brother Jinyao. Hu Jinyao still had work to deal with, so he didn't have time to deal with this spoiled girl. He didn't expect that He Xianyao would stand in front of him again when he was about to walk past her to enter the office. Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao looked at He Xianyao in front of him with cold eyes. "What do you want? Can't I come to you if I don't have anything to say?" He Xuanyao's voice was full of grievance when she said that. In fact, she couldn't stand it anymore after working at Tianyu Group. She didn't expect Hu Jinyao to be so cruel. He demoted her to the marketing department and said that she was going to study. The so-called study was being tortured by her ugly and bad-tempered boss every day. He said that she was doing market research, but he made her stand outside in the cold wind. She didn't see anyone and she had to wait outside for people to come and do questionnaires. Chapter 513. Moreover, He Xianyao didn't believe that the headquarters of Tianyu Group needed someone to do a questionnaire. If their company wanted to collect data, they already had professionals. Not to mention a big company like Tianyu Group. She didn't want to do it, so the ugly man told her to get out. She didn't want to leave. At least she didn't want to leave like this. She hadn't proven her ability in front of Hu Jinyao. How could she leave? It wasn't easy for her. She had to beg people to collect the data. The ugly man said that the data she collected couldn't be trusted and that there was too little data. What did that mean? If he didn't deliberately make things difficult for her, then He Xianyao would really be an idiot. Today was the same thing. He said that the data from a few days ago didn't count and forced her to investigate again. He Xianyao had an argument with her boss downstairs. After the argument, she said that she wanted to resign and left. However, when she really came out, she thought of what Lu Tongjia had told her and didn't want to leave. After thinking about it, she had to go upstairs to find Hu Jinyao and ask for an explanation from him. In what capacity? Hu Jinyao's voice was indifferent. He looked at He Xianyao politely. "I'm just looking for you. Do I still need your status?" He Xianyao was furious. "What else?" Hu Jinyao looked at He Xianyao as if she was an idiot. "If you came to me as an employee, then you can write a report and give it to your boss. You can give it to me. If you came to me as a private person, then I'm sorry. I have nothing to say to you, and I have nothing to say to you." Hu Jinyao. He Xianyao had been pampered since she was a child. All the grievances she had suffered came from Hu Jinyao. "Why do you have to treat me like this? I just like you. You like me, so I should let you like me? What kind of logic was that? Besides, I have a wife. Don't you know? She doesn't deserve you." Speaking of this, He Xianyao was very unconvinced. Even Andy doesn't like her. How can a woman like her deserve you? She doesn't deserve you, but you do. Hu Jinyao glanced at He Xianyao coldly and said, "It seems that Miss He didn't look at herself in the mirror before going out." He Xianyao was on the verge of tears. She had never expected Hu Jinyao to be so vicious. "No matter what, I'm Li Juanxing's cousin. You have such a good relationship with my cousin. Is this how you bully me? Junxing is Junxing and you are you. If you continue to pester me so unreasonably, I won't give face to Lian Junxing anymore." His expression told He Xianyao that he was telling the truth. He was serious. She burst into tears, turned around and left without looking back. Yang Wenchang and Ding Qing were still standing there when she was talking to Hu Jinyao. The only difference was that Yang Wenchang already knew that He Xianyao would be put in a difficult position. In fact, he was the one who asked Zhang to do it. Apparently, it was the first time that Ding Qing had seen Hu Jinyao like that. She stood there without moving, staring at Hu Jinyao. So, he was this ruthless to other women? Ding Qing didn't expect that. Recently, Hu Jingyao hadn't been gentle to her, but he had been polite. After all, she was confident in her abilities. Occasionally, Hu Jingyao would praise her for doing a good job. Only now did she realize that he was being polite when he was usually cold. Hu Jingyao came back to his senses and found that his secretary was in a daze. He frowned slightly and said, "Secretary Ding? Is there anything else?" "I'm sorry, President Hua." Ding Qing apologized immediately. "I'm really sorry. I tried to stop her, but she just didn't want to listen to me." "It's okay. It's not your fault." Hu Jingyao thought of the phone call earlier. He wasn't in the mood to deal with He Xianyao. If she wanted to stay, she had to follow the rules of Tianyu Group. If she wanted to leave, he would be more than happy to let her go. "By the way, President Hua, I've put the documents on your desk. You see, I'll go now." Hu Jingyao strode towards his office. Ding Qing narrowed her eyes and stopped thinking. She quickly followed Hu Jingyao into his office. Old Master Li's birthday wasn't a birthday celebration, so he didn't plan to make it a big one. He only invited Old Master Li's cousin, Old Master Li, and his great-aunt. They also invited their children and grandchildren. It was about the same as the last time Su Qingsang invited them. Although Li Qinxue prepared a room for Su Qingsang, she thought that Hu Jingyao would come back with her. Hu Jingyao didn't come back, so she dragged Su Qingsang to sleep with her. The mother and daughter chatted for the whole night. They were so close that Su Yusin still looked jealous when he got up and left the room this morning. "Mom, you're so biased. Now that my sister is back, you're ignoring me." Li Qinxue looked at her son's jealous face and reached out to poke his forehead. "How old are you? Why are you still jealous of your sister? Don't you think that you're both boys? What? Do you still need your mother to coax you to sleep?" Su Yusin hooked his arm around Li Qinshue's arm. "Mom, I'm just jealous." "What? You're the only one who can be biased, but I can't be jealous?" Su Qingsang was amused. "Don't be jealous. I'll be leaving in 2 days anyway. I'll return Mom to you then." She suddenly turned serious and looked at Su Yusin with a sad face. "Speaking of which, if brother doesn't like me coming back, then I won't come back next time." No. I just said it casually." Su Yusin quickly reached out to put his arm around her shoulder. "Sister, don't take it seriously." Su Qingsang looked at his hand on her shoulder and suddenly laughed. "Yes, I'm also joking. Don't take it seriously." "Well, you actually scared me." When Su Yusin spoke, he wanted to tickle Su Qingsang. How could Su Qingsang let him do what he wanted? After a cry, she quickly ran downstairs. Su Yusin hurriedly followed behind. Li Qinshuo looked at her 2 children laughing and joking like this, as if the previous gap of more than 20 years did not exist. She curled her lips because of this recognition. The current state was very good. She liked the current state. If possible, she really hoped that Su Qingsang and Su Yusin would be by her side forever. However, she also knew that that could only be her wishful thinking. After Su Qingsang got married, she would be a member of the Hua family in the future. Su Yusin was still young, even though he had already been recommended. Although he had been recommended, he still had to go to school in the future. After the children grew up and left, she would be alone again. This thought disappeared when she went downstairs and saw Su Yusin and Su Qingsang sitting together. Chapter 5:14. After breakfast, Su Qingsang sat with Old Master Li for a while, then used the bathroom as an excuse to hide and call Hu Jingyao. Today was Old Master Li's birthday. She wanted to see if he could make it. When Hu Jingyao didn't show up last night, she knew that he wouldn't be able to make it. She believed that he had important business matters to attend to since he didn't return to Lin City with her to celebrate Old Master Li's birthday. However, she still hoped that Hu Jingyao could rush over at the last minute. Although she had already guessed that Hu Jingyao might not be able to leave, Su Qingsang couldn't hide her nervousness when the call was connected. "Jingyao? Wife, I was so busy yesterday that I forgot to call you." "I'm fine." Even through the phone, Su Qingsang could hear the hoarseness in his voice. "Jingyao, are you okay?" "I'm fine." Hu Jingyao sounded more energetic than before. "Honey, I'm afraid I can't come to celebrate Grandpa's birthday." "It's okay. Grandpa won't mind." Yesterday, she didn't say anything definite in front of her grandfather. She only said that Hu Jingyao would rush over after finishing his work. He believed that Grandpa would understand. "Take care of yourself. Don't get too tired." Su Qingsang thought for a moment and added, "And remember to eat." "I know. I will." The corners of Hu Jingyao's lips curled up slightly. Because of Su Qingsang's concern, he became much gentler. "Honey," Hu Jingyao suddenly called her name. Huh? I miss you. They had only been apart for a day, but Hu Jingyao already missed her. If she was here, even if she didn't do anything, even if she didn't know anything, as long as she was by his side, he always felt a lot more at ease. Even if she couldn't help her in business, as long as she was in his arms, he would feel at ease. I missed you too. Her eyes were shining. It's okay. I'll be back in a couple of days. Yes. I'll be waiting for you. Wu Jingyao hung up the phone. His face was no longer as relaxed as before. He looked at the stack of documents in front of him, and his face was unprecedentedly serious. Li Qianxue confirmed the lunch menu with the kitchen again. When he came out, he found Su Qingsang hiding in the corridor and talking on the phone. By the time she saw it, she had already hung up. Mom. Su Qingsang walked towards her quickly. Are you looking for me? Are you calling Jingyao? How was it? Can he come over? Su Qingsang shook her head, looking a little guilty. Something urgent happened in his company and he had to deal with it. That's why he couldn't make it. I'm fine. I understand. Li Qianxue held her hand and asked her to go to the living room with her. If he can't come, then so be it. In any case, the people who came today were all family members. You've seen many of them before. Yes, I know. My paternal grandfather and his descendants, as well as my paternal aunt and her descendants. Besides, he had seen them before, but he didn't interact much with them. It's good that they know each other. Anyway, they are relying on the Li family to live. His attitude toward you will definitely be very polite. If anyone is rude to you or gives you a hard time, don't hold it in. Just fight back. Don't think that she didn't know that many of those people had targeted Su Qingsang in the past, openly or secretly. Although these things were related to her attitude in the past. But the past was the past and now was the present. Now the situation was different. Of course, she wouldn't let anyone bully her daughter again. Not even the slightest bit of attitude was allowed. Mom, I know. Don't worry. They won't. Not to mention that she had acknowledged Li Qianxue now, just based on her identity as the wife of the president of Tianyu Group. As long as those people weren't stupid, they wouldn't think of provoking her, right? I know they won't. But I'm afraid that someone won't be smart. Li Qianxue patted Su Qingsang's hand. Anyway, remember, in this family, no one can make you feel wronged. Mom. Su Qingsang's eyes were a little sore and touched. She rubbed her face against Li Qianxue's shoulder. Her voice was very soft. You're going to spoil me. What's wrong with spoiling you? Li Qianxue didn't think she was going too far. I think it's too late. If she had known earlier, she would have loved her daughter earlier. How could things have developed to this point? She had missed so many years with her daughter? Li Qianxue was still upset that she hadn't discovered it earlier. She was gritting her teeth at Su Qinghui, who had caused the situation. However, as soon as she entered the living room with Su Qingsang, she saw a person who shouldn't have been there. Su Qinghui. Seeing that it was him, Li Qianxue's face immediately darkened. She glared at Su Qinghui with a cold face, as if she wanted to stare a hole in his body. Why are you here? Ever since they signed the divorce papers, the two of them hadn't seen each other for nearly 2 months. Because of Su Qinghui's resignation, the Li Corporation's business had been on her shoulders for a long time. Li Qianxue's ability wasn't bad, but the sudden increase of so much work also made her very tired. It was also because of this period of busy work that she didn't have time to think about Su Qinghui. It was very easy for her to know about him, but she didn't want to know. Even when her son or daughter mentioned this person in front of her, she would still be unhappy. Since he had already left, he was no longer here. There was no need for him to come back, let alone show up. If he wanted to see the children, he could just see them outside. This was good for both him and her. She didn't want to see this person. Now that she suddenly saw Su Qinghui, Li Qianxue was really unhappy. The guests in this house hadn't arrived yet. What was Su Qinghui doing here? What are you doing here? Get out. You're not welcome here. Even in front of the two children, Li Qianxue didn't mind making Su Qinghui lose face. In her opinion, she didn't need to give him face at all. After Li Qianxue appeared, Su Qinghui's eyes were fixed on her. They hadn't seen each other for nearly 2 months, and she seemed to have lost a little weight. She looked good. Today was Old Master Li's birthday. She had put on light makeup. Because it was a family banquet, Li Qianxue didn't wear a dress. She was wearing a simple red dress, festive and flamboyant. She was clearly in her 40s, but she was able to completely suppress such a gorgeous color. Just like her personality, she was clear about her likes and dislikes. Like a flame, people couldn't help but be attracted to her. Su Qinghui. Noticing that Su Qinghui was staring at her, Li Qianxue felt even worse. What are you doing here? Today is Dad's birthday. Chapter 5:15. Who's your father? Li Qianxue's eyes were unfriendly and her expression was cold. Su Qinghui's way of addressing her made her panic. What was he doing? Making connections? Su Qinghui looked at the aggressive Li Qianxue and felt bitter in his heart. Qianxue, no matter what, I've called your father father for more than 20 years. I also sincerely regard your father as my own father. Do you have to do this? Li Qianxue sneered with a hint of mockery on her face. You regard my father as your father? So you tortured my father's daughter? Replaced my father's granddaughter? Su Qinghui, is this how you regard my father as your own father? Su Yusin and Su Qingsang both stood behind Li Qianxue without moving. Old Master Li seemed to not hear Li Qianxue's words. He just sat on the sofa and looked at the gift in front of him, which was brought by Su Qinghui. No one supported him, no one helped him. Su Qinghui stood there and found that he really seemed to have nothing to do with this family. Su Qinghui was speechless by Li Qianxue. He knew that coming today would not end well, but he had to come. If he didn't come today, he didn't even know what kind of excuse he could find to see Li Qianxue. You should go. I don't want to see you. Su Qinghui knew that if he wanted to save face, he should leave as soon as possible. However, looking at Li Qianxue's beautiful face, he couldn't move his feet at all. He just stood on the ground and looked at Li Qianxue, his eyes burning and his gaze fervent. That kind of gaze made Li Qianxue feel disgusted again, and her tone was even more unfriendly than before. I said get out. Did you hear me? Li Qianxue was really disgusted by the man in front of her. It was so disgusting that when she thought of what Su Qinghui had done, she wanted to bite him a few times to vent her anger. Su Qinghui stood there without moving, just staring at Li Qianxue. That gaze gave Li Qianxue goosebumps. It was not because she was touched but because she was disgusted. She was about to ask someone to come over and drive Su Qinghui out, but Su Yusin took a step forward and stood in front of Su Qinghui. Li Qianxue didn't want to see Su Qinghui, but Su Yusin couldn't have the same attitude as Li Qianxue. When Su Qinghui came in, he noticed that he didn't seem to be having a good time. Today, Su Qinghui had specially cleaned himself up for old Master Li's birthday. If he hadn't cleaned himself up, he would have looked even worse. After all, they were father and son. Su Yusin didn't want to see his father like this. It made him sad. Dad, how have you been lately? You don't seem to have rested well. His eyes were red, and even though his clothes were neat and tidy, he still looked somewhat dispirited. Su Qinghui looked at Su Yusin, his eyes full of gratitude. I've had a lot of things to do in the past 2 days. It'll be fine once I get over it. Dad, you have to take care of yourself. Su Yusin was trying to give Su Qinghui a way out. After saying that, he didn't forget to look at Li Qianxue, his eyes a little pleading. Li Qianxue turned her face away from Su Yusin. She was still angry and hoped that Su Qinghui would leave. She didn't want to see him. Su Yusin could only look at Su Qingsang again. Su Qingsang received her brother's gaze and sighed deeply in her heart. Dad, have you had breakfast yet? As Su Qingsang spoke, she blinked at Su Qinghui. No. Su Qinghui looked at Su Qingsang. He didn't expect it. At a time like this daughter who had never been close to him, was actually willing to help him once. He looked at Su Qingsang and felt a little hot in his eyes. I just saw that there was a lot of breakfast left in the kitchen. Dad, if you don't mind, why don't you go and eat some? Su Qingsang looked at Su Qinghui with a particularly sincere look in her eyes. It's not good for your stomach if you don't eat breakfast. Dad, you'd better go and eat. Su Qinghui didn't move and looked at Li Qianxue again. How could Li Qianxue not see the look in her daughter's eyes just now? She didn't expect that both Su Qingsang and Su Yusin would stand on Su Qinghui's side. She couldn't tell what she felt in her heart. When she met her daughter's slightly pleading eyes, she turned her face away with hatred. If it was only Su Yusin who said it, she could pretend that she didn't hear it. But Su Qingsang, Li Qianxue almost couldn't bear to refuse any of her requests now. Dad, you should go and eat quickly. As Su Qingsang spoke, she glanced at Su Yusin. Yusin, you didn't eat much just now. Why don't you eat some with Dad? Okay. Su Yusin immediately understood what Su Qingsang meant. Ignoring Su Qinghui, who was still standing there in a daze, he took him in the direction of the dining room. Su Qinghui's footsteps were a little hesitant, but he was pulled to the dining room by Su Yusin. The figures of Su Qinghui and his son disappeared around the corner. Li Qianxue looked at Su Qingsang with a complicated look in her eyes. Mom. Su Qingsang knew that she was unhappy, so she took the initiative to hook her hand. You see, our family doesn't lack breakfast, right? Li Qianxue didn't speak. She wanted to wait for Su Qinghui to finish eating and then drive him away. It wasn't that she was cruel, nor was it that she was too much. It was just that when she thought of what Su Qinghui had done, she really didn't want to see him, not at all. Li Qianxue had a good idea. She wanted to drive Su Qinghui away. But she didn't expect that he hadn't finished eating yet. The guests came. Great-grandfather Li, her great-aunt, and their children. They were relatives, and Li Qianxue didn't want to lose face in front of these relatives. In the end, after Su Qinghui finished eating, he actually stayed and didn't leave. And she couldn't drive him away even if she wanted to. After all, with so many relatives here, she couldn't drive Su Qinghui out in front of so many people, could she? The noon banquet was quite lively. The older old master Li got, the more he liked to see his children and grandchildren in front of him. The group of people had a lively lunch. Throughout the whole process, except for Su Qingsang and her brother, Su Qinghui had been by old master Li's side. He looked like the son-in-law of the Li family. Su Qingsang and Su Yusing glanced at each other from time to time. No matter what happened between Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui, at least the two of them still regarded Su Qinghui as a member of the family. Some relatives didn't know the inside story and thought that Li Qianxue and Su Qinghui were still together. Previously, there was a lot of talk about divorce, but no matter what, they had been husband and wife for so many years. From the looks of it, it was clear that they quarreled at the head of the bed and reconciled at the end. In particular, Li Qianxue's cousin-in-law looked at the two of them with the eyes of an experienced person. The meaning of that look was self-evident. Li Qianxue was so angry that she had a headache. If it weren't for the fact that there were guests, she would have gone up to Su Qinghui and torn that smug smile off his face. In fact, Su Qinghui was not smug at all. Although he was accompanying old Master Li, he was not a fool. He could see that neither old Master Li nor Li Qianxue liked him. However, there were guests at home now, and they didn't want to fall out with him in front of the guests, so they tolerated him. Su Qinghui was still following old Master Li even after the guests left. Su Qingsang and Su Yusing could tolerate it and continue to be a harmonious family with Su Qinghui. But Li Qianxue didn't want to tolerate it. She had tolerated Su Qinghui for a whole day. She wanted to go up and ask Su Qinghui to get out. However, after a day of silence on this matter, old Master Li finally opened his mouth. "Qinghui, come with me." Since old Master Li had spoken, Li Qianxue couldn't kick him out even if she wanted to. She could only watch Su Qinghui follow old Master Li upstairs with hatred. After entering the study, old Master Li laid out the chessboard, looked at Su Qinghui and said in a calm voice, "I haven't played chess with you for a while. Let's play a game." Su Qinghui looked at old Master Li. He didn't think that old Master Li was still in the mood to play chess with him. However, he still sat down across from old Master Li. Old Master Li went first with a white piece, then looked at Su Qinghui indicating for him to continue. The two of them played back and forth. Halfway through the game, old Master Li suddenly stopped moving his chess piece. "You have a plan in mind and you have a strategy when you play. Qinghui, your chess skills are much better than before." Su Qinghui was silent. He hadn't had time to play chess in the past 2 months. What old Master Li said sounded like a sarcastic remark to him. "What? Do you think I'm lying to you?" Old Master Li sighed and put down the chess piece in his hand. "Qinghui, you used to play chess well, but there were always some vacillations just like you. I've always known that you didn't know what you wanted before, and you didn't know what was most important to you. But now, looking at your way of playing, you seem to know?" Su Qinghui's eyes were a little hot. He looked at old Master Li and said in a hoarse voice, "Dad, I was wrong." Old Master Li raised his hand and didn't want to hear Su Qinghui say this. "Qinghui, I don't want to judge whether you were wrong or not. Do you regret it? I don't want to know. I just want to tell you. Life is like chess. There are no regrets. Since you have done some things, you have to bear the consequences. Dad, it doesn't matter if you regret it or know that you were wrong. These things have nothing to do with Qianxue now." "Dad." Su Qinghui looked up at him with an indescribable pain in his eyes. "I really regret it. Qinghui, not all regrets have a chance to do it again." The expression on old Master Li's face was painful and regretful. "In the past, I focused on expanding my business. I always thought that I wanted to make the Li Corporation bigger and stronger. But I really made it big and strong. The person who could share it with me is gone. I often regret it and often reflect on it. I always think that if I were young and didn't focus on business like this, I wouldn't have focused on my career every day. If I didn't focus on my career every day, would Qianshua's mother have lived a few more years? But there's no answer. She's dead. She's gone. No matter how much I regret it, it's useless. Su Qinghui didn't speak. Some things were blinded by a leaf. If he didn't remove the leaf, how could he find out what he really thought? I'm very happy that you still remember my birthday today. I thank you too. But you and Qinshui are just like this. Just like what? He didn't say the rest, but Su Qinghui understood what old Master Li meant. His expression suddenly changed again. Chapter 5:16. Dad, that's all? Old Master Li looked at Su Qinghui with a complicated look in his eyes. There was a hint of regret in his eyes. Qinshui and I won't stop you from seeing the children, but you and Qinshui don't need to see each other anymore. Su Qinghui's face was pale. He was already in his 40s. He had experienced a lot of storms and waves, but at this moment he was like a greenhorn, completely at a loss of what to do. Old Master Li and Su Qinghui had been friends for so many years. Although he couldn't bear it, he didn't care. But during this period of time he could really see it. His daughter didn't miss Su Qinghui at all. As long as his daughter had the slightest bit of nostalgia, he would give Su Qinghui a chance so that he and Li Qinshui could have another possibility. However, Li Qinshui had made it clear that she didn't want to see Su Qinghui. Since that was the case, why should he force her? He looked at the chessboard. You've won this round. You don't have to play the rest. He won? He had clearly lost, and he had lost completely. Su Qinghui stood up and went downstairs like a ghost. When he went downstairs, Li Qinshui was in the living room, asking people to clean up the mess. She was sitting next to Su Qingsang talking about something. Su Qingsang saw him coming downstairs and quickly stood up. This time, Su Qinghui ignored her and walked straight to Li Qinshui. Can I talk to you for a minute? No. Li Qinshui sat there without moving. I have nothing to say to you. Qinshui. Su Qinghui gritted his teeth so hard that his gums almost bled. Just 5 minutes? Can't I? No. Li Qinshui looked up at him, her eyes cold. I don't want to give you a minute. His heart felt like it had been pierced by another arrow. Su Qinghui's voice was pleading. Qinshui, you, sister. Su Yusin had just come back from sending a guest. She didn't know how long he had been in the room, but he looked at Su Qingsang. You just came back yesterday. I forgot to give you a present. Come upstairs with me to get it. Su Qingsang glanced at him. Even if he didn't call her, she was going to leave. Mom, take a seat first. I'll go upstairs to get the gift. Su Qingsang followed Su Yusin upstairs. Before leaving, Su Yusin glanced at Uncle Zhang and motioned for him to ask the servants in the living room to leave first. Uncle Zhang was also very perceptive. With a wave of his hand, the rest of the people left. Li Qinshui sat there, feeling a little stifled. She looked at Su Qinghui and said, Su Qinghui, are you very proud now? He had been away from home for so long, yet there were still people who stood by him? Qinshui, I feel very uncomfortable right now. Su Qinghui couldn't be smug in front of her at all. Really, I feel very uncomfortable. The assets you get after our divorce should be enough for you to find a good hospital, right? Li Qinshui's words were rather blunt. Or, have you already spent all your money in just 2 months? It's okay, I can still afford it. Go ahead. How much do you want? She was treating Su Qinghui like a beggar. Su Qinghui clenched his fists, and his voice was low and hoarse with bitterness. Qinshui, I'm not here to ask you for money. Then what do you want? Li Qinshui turned her face to look at him with an impatient expression. Don't say that you regret it. After you left me, you suddenly realized that you fell in love with me, so you want to get back together with me? Su Qinghui was rendered speechless by her words and couldn't continue. What could he say? Could he say that he wanted to get back together with her? What he could say was that he only realized after losing her that he fell in love with her, couldn't live without her, and wanted to start over with her. Qinshui, don't be like this. I do regret it. Qinshui, I'm sincere to you, Su Qinghui. Li Qinshui stood up and stared straight at his face. Her gaze was cold and filled with disdain. Can you be more shameless? Qinshui? In order to return to the Li family, you really can tell any lie? Li Qinshui didn't believe him at all. In her opinion, this was just one of Su Qinghui's tricks. Qinshui, I want to come back, but not to the Li family. I want to return to your side. Li Qinshui couldn't take it anymore. Return to my side? I'm representing the Li family now. Don't you know? Su Qinghui knew that she had a deep misunderstanding of him. That's enough. Li Qinshui stood up. Su Qinghui, if you still have any dignity, then get as far away as you can. Don't appear in front of me. As for what you said, I'm sorry, but I don't believe a word you said, or even a punctuation mark. So you don't have to say anything. Li Qianxue turned around and was about to leave. Su Qinghui was anxious and reached out to grab her hand. Qianxue, what I said is true. What I said is also true. Li Qianxue wanted to pull her hand out, but Su Qinghui was very strong. She was in a bad mood and her face darkened. Su Qinghui, I'm warning you, don't be so shameless. For the sake of the children, I don't want to make things difficult for you. But don't force me to do things to the extreme. To be honest, she was actually disappointed at this point today. However, this disappointment was not for Su Qinghui, but for Su Peijian. Su Qinghui obviously had a purpose for coming here. She wouldn't think that his arrival was sincere for old Master Li's birthday. She was really disappointed in Su Peijian. She had raised her for more than 20 years, even if she wasn't her biological daughter. But for so many years, whether it was her or old Master Li, their care for her were sincere. However, on a day like today, Su Peijian didn't even call, let alone visit the old master. Su Peijian was indeed Su Qinghui's daughter. She inherited the cold side of his personality. No matter how good he was to her, it was useless. Li Qianxue didn't want to think of the daughter she had raised. She didn't want to admit it, but she couldn't control her emotions and think in that direction. Qianxue. Su Qinghui only realized today that as long as Li Qianxue said a casual word, she could hurt him. His status had changed and his role had changed. He seemed to finally understand his thoughts at that time. Was this how she had felt when he had treated her so coldly all those years ago? Don't call me. Li Qianxue didn't want to be entangled with this person here. It was meaningless at all. I heard you call my name and I felt disgusted. Su Qinghui was hit by another arrow. He almost couldn't stand. He staggered and took a step back. Qianxue, don't say that you really fell in love with me. If this is your love, then your love can only make me feel disgusted and disgusted. Li Qianxue looked at his pretense and didn't give him a minute. She turned around and left. Su Qinghui was left standing there, watching Li Qianxue's back disappear around the corner of the stairs. He felt that because of Li Qianxue's words, he had been hit by arrows again and again. He sat down and supported his head with his hands. He felt a swelling pain in his eyes and something almost wanted to rush out of them, but he restrained himself. So, Qianxue, do you hate me this much? Although he knew that this was what he deserved and that it was his own fault, Su Qinghui still felt hurt. Su Qingsang waited for a long time. When she came down from upstairs, she was holding a small box in her hand. She wasn't surprised to see that Su Qinghui was left alone. She went forward and sat down next to Su Qinghui. Su Qinghui thought that Li Qianxue had returned. When he raised his head, there was a faint expectation in his eyes. When he saw that the person who came was Su Qingsang, his eyes darkened again. This reaction was too obvious. Su Qingsang was really sure of Su Qinghui's feelings now. It turned out that he really fell in love with his mother after he divorced her. Or perhaps it wasn't like any more but love? That. Su Qingsang handed him the box in her hand. This is a gift I bought in Rong City. I originally wanted to give it to you in 2 days. Su Qinghui looked at the box and then at the sincerity in Su Qingsang's eyes. He felt something hit his heart. There was a muffled, dull pain. He remembered that every time his daughter went out, she would buy gifts for her family. It wasn't necessarily very expensive, but it was her heart. However, every time she gave something, it would be thrown away by him or Li Qianxue. Qingsang. Su Qinghui thought of how he had neglected and ignored Su Qingsang for so many years. But now, Su Qingsang had been helping him and even preparing gifts for him. Dad. Li Qianxue was angry, and her hatred hadn't dissipated. Therefore, she didn't notice how passionate Su Qinghui's eyes were, nor did she care that Su Qinghui's eyes were full of love when he looked at her. Qingsang. I'm sorry, I used to, Dad. Su Qingsang wasn't there to listen to Su Qinghui's apology. Besides, he had already said, May I ask, are you really in love with Mom? Su Qinghui was stunned for a moment. He looked at Su Qingsang with a bitter expression. You don't believe me either? He knew that he was wrong. He also knew that his past behavior was indeed a bad record. However, until today no one was willing to believe his words, and no one was willing to stand on his side. This made Su Qinghui depressed. He was also annoyed, but more than that he felt bitter. No, I believe you. In fact, Su Qingsang had guessed it a long time ago. If Su Qinghui really didn't love Li Qianxue, he would have divorced Xiang Kaiping after she appeared. After all, if he really loved Xiang Kaiping as much as he said, he would have been with her a long time ago. Secondly, if he really loved Xiang Kaiping that much, why would he be threatened by Li Qianxue to marry her? Qingsang? I believe you. Su Qingsang thought of Li Qianxue's expression just now. She reached out and put her hand on Su Qinghui's arm. "Dad, I believe that you really love Mom." Su Qinghui was a little emotional. He didn't expect that the person who would believe him now was the daughter he had never cared about. Chapter 517. Su Qinghui was only in his 40s. Seriously speaking, he was still very young. He still had many possibilities. Plans? What plans? Su Qinghui looked bitter. "I haven't thought about it yet. However, I have 2 friends who have been asking me to start a company with them. I think I might go with them." "I'm not asking you about business. I'm not asking you what you're going to do in the future. I'm asking you since you know that you love my mother. What plans do you have for the future? What plans can I have?" Su Qinghui looked helpless. "Your mother hates me so much now. I can only stay away from her." As soon as Su Qinghui finished speaking, he saw the disapproval in his daughter's eyes. That. Su Qingsang really felt strange. How did Su Qinghui, who had such a low EQ, become the general manager of Li Group for so many years? "Don't tell me you're really willing to never see me again? What else can I do? Your mother hates me so much now, didn't you hate her too? You even swapped me with Su Peijian because you hated her." After saying that, Su Qingsang realized that her attitude was not right. She cleared her throat. "Dad, I don't blame you. I mean, if my mother wanted to, she could have spent more than 20 years softening you up and making you fall in love with her. Why can't you spend the rest of your life begging for my mother's forgiveness?" Su Qinghui looked at Su Qingsang in a daze, almost unable to understand what she meant. Was she trying to give him an idea? "Dad, think about it. You're only in your 40s this year. If you live to be 100 years old, you still have more than 50 years left. Are you really willing to have my mother disappear from your life? Are you really willing to be a stranger to my mother and never see each other again?" Su Qingsang's eyes were clear and full of sincerity. Su Qinghui was almost bewitched by her words. "You mean, if you think that my mother's reaction today made you feel bad, you should give up? Then is your love for my mother real? Why is it that my mother can spend decades being ignored by you, but she still thinks of you and loves you wholeheartedly? Since my mother can spend such a long time to move you, then why don't you do it? You can take that long to move her. Even if my mom really didn't want to forgive you in the end, at least you tried." Su Qingsang really thought so. "Don't you think that even if you fail in the end, you still have a chance? But at least you've tried, right? At least you won't regret it. Not to mention you're just doing what my mother did before. Humans are not plants, they are not emotionless." During this time, Su Qingsang had gotten to know Li Qianxue better. She believed that as long as Su Qinghui showed his sincerity to Li Qianxue, he would be happy. Li Qianxue would always be touched by him. Even if he couldn't, he should at least give himself a chance, right? Hearing Su Qingsang's words, Su Qinghui's expression suddenly became eager. But after the fervor, it turned into bitterness. "What's the point? Your mother doesn't even want to see me now. She doesn't want to see you. You have to create opportunities for her to see you. As for why she's so resistant to you, didn't you also resist my mother for decades?" Su Qinghui didn't say anything. For the first time, he looked at Su Qingsang with a new and completely different gaze. She was his daughter. He had neglected her for many years and had almost never given her a trace of love. But it was this daughter who was still willing to give him ideas and think for him in his current situation. Waves of warmth surged in his heart, and emotions of gratitude surged in his heart. There was also a faint sense of guilt and self-blame. Su Qingsang's words stopped there and she didn't want to say more. If Su Qinghui wanted to, he naturally knew how to get Li Qianxue back. If his love was just lip service, then it didn't matter whether he worked hard or not. After all, Li Qianxue was still young. If she left Su Qinghui, a man who didn't really love her, she still had a chance to find another man. It was also a good ending for both of them to be happy. "Qingsang. Thank you." Su Qinghui thanked Su Qingsang sincerely. By now he could no longer simply treat Su Qingsang as a child. She was not only a daughter who had been neglected by him, but also an adult who had grown up, matured, and had her own independent thinking and opinions. "Dad." Su Qingsang smiled. "You're my dad. You don't need to thank me." She said that she didn't need to thank him, but Su Qinghui was really grateful to this daughter. She didn't resent him for being changed. Instead, she could even care about him. He looked at Su Qingsang and thought of his other daughter, Su Peijian. He had doted on Su Peijian for so many years, but what did Su Peijian do? Until now, she hadn't even called him or sent him any news. From the looks of it, it seemed that she didn't want him, her father. In comparison, he was not as good as Su Qingsang. Su Qingsang said these words today. Although it couldn't be said to be enlightened, it really gave him some confidence. Su Qinghui didn't say that he didn't know what he should do. He knew, but at this time Su Qingsang's words were undoubtedly the greatest encouragement to him. I didn't do anything. Su Qingsang smiled. She knew that Su Qinghui had already made up his mind. He just needed someone to help him again. Su Qinghui looked at the smile on Su Qingsang's face and suddenly reached out to hug her. This time, it was Su Qingsang's turn to be stunned. Su Qinghui had never hugged her since she was a child. Su Qinghui's eyes were slightly warm. This was his daughter. He quickly let go of his hand. He felt a little uncomfortable seeing Su Qingsang's shocked expression. Qingsang, I know that when you married Hu Jinyao it was also an accident. Although my current ability can't be compared to Chanyu Group, if one day he makes you feel wronged you must tell me. I will definitely teach that brat a good lesson. Dad. Su Qingsang now knew why Su Qinghui and Li Qianxue were together. With such a domineering and protective manner, was this really the only one in the family and no other branch? Don't worry. Hu Jinyao is quite good. Su Qinghui didn't say anything. He could more or less tell whether Hu Jinyao was good or not. At this moment he was a little envious. Hu Jinyao was much better than him in this regard. From the beginning he had a clear goal and knew what he wanted. On the other hand, he had been muddle-headed for so many years before he came to his senses. In comparison he was really too inferior to Hu Jinyao. Chapter 518. Su Qinghui thought it through and left. Su Qingsang looked at his back and didn't know if what she did was right or wrong. After all, that man was her father. She couldn't bear to hurt him. More importantly, if he really loved Li Qianxue, why didn't he give himself and Li Qianxue a chance? However, thinking of Li Qianxue, she hesitated. If Li Qianxue couldn't forgive Su Qinghui in the end, she would probably blame her. Don't worry. Mom won't blame you. No one knew when Su Yusen had arrived. He sat down next to Su Qingsang. Did you hear that? Yes. Su Yusen nodded. Although he was young, he wasn't really a child. Sister, don't worry. Even if Mom is really unhappy, she won't be mad at you. I can't do anything if she's really angry. Su Qingsang couldn't bear to hurt Su Qinghui. Not only her, but Su Yusen also hoped that the family could be as good as before. She just didn't know what Li Qianxue would do. Wrong city. Hu Jinyao had just gotten off the phone with Su Qingsang, but he wasn't as calm as he appeared to be in front of her. He looked at Yang Wenchang with a sullen face. What do you mean by Qiao Hong is missing? I asked someone to keep an eye on the Qiao family, but Qiao Hong hasn't gone out these days. Later, I asked someone to knock on the door under the pretext of collecting property fees, but he wasn't home. I checked the surveillance footage and found that he left last night in disguise. Yang Wenchang blamed himself for not doing a good job. He didn't expect that there would be a time when he would make a mistake. Hu Jinyao waved his hand. There were indeed a lot of things to do in the company. Working with Ikes was one thing, but the Huo brothers kept playing dirty tricks and making trouble for him from time to time was another. What was more serious was that the data of the new product developed by Hu Jinyao's company for the next quarter was stolen by Qiao Hong, one of Hu Jinyao's subordinates. That was the reason why Hu Jinyao didn't have time to go to Lin City with Su Qingsang. He went back to the company and asked someone to keep an eye on Qiao Hong. They didn't call the police for the time being because the launch of Tianyu Group's new product had reached a critical moment. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. If Qiao Hong only wanted to use this to threaten him, he would have let it go. If Qiao Hong sold this to a rival company, thinking of this, Hu Jinyao's face darkened. President Hua, should we call the police? No. If this had nothing to do with the rival company, Tianyu would only make the situation more complicated. Sort out all of Qiao Hong's information and send it to my email. I'll send someone to find him. Yang Wenchang nodded and quickly left. Hu Jinyao took out his phone and started to make a call. Someone knocked on the door. Hu Jinyao thought it was Yang Wenchang, but it was Ding Qing. President Hua. She walked quickly to Hu Jinyao with a document in her hand. I've looked into it and asked the people who work with Qiao Hong. Qiao Hong's neighbor heard that Qiao Hong had a girlfriend. The two of them had planned to get married. But something happened recently. What happened? Hu Jinyao was impressed by Ding Qing's efficiency, which was very rare. Ding Qing was the first one to find out that Qiao Hong had gone missing with the company's confidential information. Although she came to the project later, Zhang Yang had been involved in it. Therefore, Ding Qing knew something about the project after she arrived. Qiao Hong's girlfriend has uremia. He needs a kidney transplant. It's too expensive for him to afford. So, it must be a mistake. Hu Jinyao frowned. He didn't agree with Ding Qing's statement. Tianyu Group had great benefits. If Qiao Hong was in trouble, he could have explained the situation to the finance department instead of stepping on the company's bottom line. However, Hu Jinyao was relieved. As long as it wasn't a rival company or Hu Yifan and Hu Jinyao, it would be fine. I found the hospital where his girlfriend is staying. Ding Qing put the document on Hu Jinyao's desk. President Hua, do you want me to go there? Find Qiao Hong? I'll go myself. Hu Jinyao looked at the name of the hospital. What a coincidence. It was the first hospital where Su Qingsang worked. If Qiao Hong wants to exchange this for money, he'll know that we're looking for him. President Hua, I'm afraid that he won't tell the truth when he sees you. Ding Qing analyzed her opinion. Look, you're the boss and he's your employee. If he does something like this, he'll be on the opposite side of you. So, I think it's better for me to go. Ding Qing's words made sense. Hu Jinyao didn't realize it until now. Ding Qing was new to the company. Everyone in Tianyu knew that Yang Wenchang worked for Hu Jinyao. Okay, you go there. It'll be great if you can find him. If you can't, it's okay. Yes. Ding Qing lowered her eyes. At this moment, she looked extremely serious. Don't worry, President Hua. I'll find a way to persuade him to come back. Just try your best. Hu Jinyao knew that Ding Qing hadn't used her full ability yet. With such a subordinate, he wanted to know what Ding Qing was capable of. Ding Qing took the order and left. Not long after lunch, Ding Qing came back. Qiao Hong isn't here. I asked his girlfriend. His girlfriend doesn't know anything about him. She's sick, so I couldn't tell her everything. Ding Qing paused for a second. When she looked at Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang, she continued, but I used his girlfriend's phone as an excuse. Qiao Hong picked up. Both Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang looked at her, waiting for her next words. He promised me that he'd come out to see me tonight. Hu Jinyao and Yang Wenchang looked at each other, then at Ding Qing together. What time is it? Where is it? Blue night. Hu Jinyao's face darkened. He looked at Ding Qing together with Yang Wenchang. President Hu, you see. Ding Qing was still asking. Hu Jinyao knew that he couldn't let Ding Qing go there alone. Blue Night was a very famous nightclub in Rong City. It was the biggest money-squandering establishment in Rong City. Only members were allowed in there. People who weren't members couldn't get in. I'll go with you tonight. Hu Jinyao wanted to solve this problem before it got out of hand. Not only did he need to solve Qiao Hong's problem as soon as possible, but he also couldn't let the board of directors know. He especially couldn't let the Hu brothers know. After all, they had been up to too many tricks recently. Hu Jinyao didn't want the Hu brothers to have something on them. That night, before the appointed time, Hu Jinyao followed Ding Qing and Yang Wenchang to the entrance of Blue Night. Chapter 519. It's okay. The owner of Blue Night was the same as the owner of the Hot Spring Club. Thinking of what Su Qingsang had told him, Hu Jinyao decided to go there himself. That man had a powerful background. If anything happened, he wouldn't be able to do anything to him. But if it was Yang Wenchang, things would be different. Find a place to park the car and wait for my call. I'll go in with Ding Hong. Hu Jinyao and Ding Qing got out of the car and walked to the gate of Blue Night together. Ding Qing seemed a little worried. She even hesitated. Hu Jinyao glanced at her and said, "It's okay. Just act normal." Ding Qing nodded. She looked at the magnificent signboard, then at Hu Jinyao and said, "President Hua, won't we be easily recognized if we go in like this?" Hu Jinyao stopped and glanced at Ding Qing. Because of what happened tonight. She wasn't wearing the professional suit she wore during the day. Instead, she was wearing a simple black dress and a beige windbreaker. He thought for a while, then said in a lower voice, "Come with me." Okay. Ding Qing was about 3 steps away from Hu Jinyao. Because of what he said, she quickened her pace and walked to his side. They walked a few steps side by side. There seemed to be a small stone on the road. Ding Qing suddenly twisted her foot. She lost her balance and fell towards Hu Jinyao. He had to reach out his hand to steady her. Ding Qing's face was pale. She looked around and found that no one was looking at them. She said in a low voice, "I'm sorry, President Hua. I was too careless." "It's okay." Hu Jinyao thought that Ding Qing did that because she was nervous. Besides, he also saw the stone on the road. "Can you stand still?" "I can." Ding Qing stood up, but her foot hurt a little. She sucked in a cold breath. She looked at Hu Jinyao. "President Hua, I think I sprained my foot." They were only a few steps away from the gate of Blue Night. Seeing that, Hu Jinyao reached out his arm and said, "Can you help me walk?" This. Ding Qing hesitated. I don't think it's a good idea. It won't be good if people misunderstand. It's okay. Wu Jiniao was focused on the meeting with Qiao Hong. It's just a show. Let's go. Ding Qing clenched her teeth, but at last she took Wu Jiniao's arm. With Hu Jiniao's help, she didn't look abnormal when she walked. Thank you, President Hua, Ding Qing said in a low voice. Wu Jiniao didn't take it to heart. After seeing Qiao Hong, I'll take you to the doctor. Thank you, President Hua. I'll go home and apply some ointment. Wu Jiniao didn't insist. The two of them entered the door together. What Hu Jiniao didn't notice was that a camera had captured the scene of the two of them walking into the Blue Night hand in hand. Lin City. Old Master Li's birthday was spent with a group of relatives at noon. In the evening, only his family would have dinner together. This year it was quieter than in previous years. In the past there was Su Qinghui and Su Peixian. Today the two of them were gone, but Su Qingsang was there. Her cooking skills were average and she wasn't particularly good at it. However, ever since she married Hu Jiniao, she had put some effort into it. So today she took the initiative to cook a bowl of noodles for the old man. Grandpa, happy birthday to you. Hu Jiniao had already prepared Old Master Li's birthday present. It was a pine tree. It wasn't an ordinary pine tree. It was carved from a whole piece of jade. The gift was delivered in the morning. The jade was of high quality and it was made by a master. The green color of the jade made the pine tree look especially tall and straight. It implied that Old Master Li would live as long as the Nanshan Mountain. It was obvious that the gift had been found with great effort. It was a good gift. Old Master Li liked it very much. However, no matter how good the gift was, it was a gift from Hu Jiniao. Su Qingsang didn't know what else to give. After thinking for a while, she decided that cooking a bowl of noodles for Old Master Li was more appropriate. Good, good, good. Old Master Li looked at the noodles that his granddaughter brought out and said the word good 3 times in a row. Old Master Li didn't lack anything at the moment. For him, the most important thing was the thought. Many years ago, Li Qianxue had cooked for him to please Su Qinghui. It was the first time that he had eaten food cooked by a junior, even if it was just a simple bowl of noodles. Grandpa, I'm not good at cooking. Please don't blame me. Su Qingsang's face was a little bitter. She wasn't particularly confident in her cooking. It looks delicious. Old Master Li was quite generous. Looking at the bowl of noodles, his eyes were full of admiration. This cooking can't be wrong. You try it first. After Su Qingsang said that, she looked at Li Qianxue and said, Mom, there's more in the kitchen. Do you want to try it too? Okay. Li Qianxue's eyes were a little red. Su Peixian didn't do any chores and Su Yusin would never enter the kitchen. Now that the whole family was eating noodles cooked by Su Qingsang, they were all surprised and a little touched. Especially Li Qianxue. She had really done everything to please Su Qinghui. She tried to learn cooking and cook for Su Qinghui. However, the final result was not satisfactory. The soup was either salty or not good enough. When the vegetables were stir-fried, they were either raw or burnt. She couldn't control the degree, but she didn't give up and always wanted to try again. In the end, she found that no matter how she tried, Su Qinghui wouldn't love her because of it, so she gave up. It's delicious. Su Yusin was the first to speak. It was obviously a very ordinary noodles, but he tasted like a feast. Really? Su Qingsang looked at him, her eyes full of disbelief. Why don't I believe it? You're not happy that I praised you? It's delicious. Li Qianxue and Old Master Li were also full of praise. Su Qingsang knew very well that it wasn't that the noodles she cooked were really delicious. It was just that Grandpa and the others gave her face. The family had a joyful and harmonious meal. That day, Su Qingsang felt that time passed very quickly, but more than that, she was happy. She really wanted to share her feelings with Hu Jiniao at this time, so she went upstairs without even taking a shower. Instead, she called Hu Jiniao first. However, no one picked up Hu Jiniao's call. Su Qingsang didn't think too much about it. She dialed again, but still no one picked up. Looking at the time, it was already past 9 o'clock in the evening. In the past, Hu Jiniao should have been home at this time. Su Qingsang's first reaction was that the matter with Hu Jiniao's company should be very tricky. At least he couldn't handle it in a short time. Su Qingsang wasn't unhappy. She was just a little worried and a little distressed. After sending a message to Hu Jiniao, telling him to take care of himself no matter how late he was, she put the phone aside. Since Su Qingsang had returned to Lin City, she naturally had to find Shi Mengwan. Early in the morning, she sent a message to Shi Mengwan asking where she was. Knowing that she was back, Shi Mengwan couldn't be more happy. The two of them agreed on a time and place to meet. Su Qingsang hung up the phone, lay on the bed and casually browsed through the local news and WeChat public accounts. After Su Qingsang went to Rong City, she followed a few local WeChat public accounts in Rong City. The local news she was reading now was naturally the local news of Rong City. They were all ordinary things. After casually browsing through a few, Su Qingsang planned to close it. However, at this time Rong City Online, which she followed, released today's news. The news was about a certain clubhouse. It said that a few rich second-generation rich kids in Rong City had a conflict with someone in a nightclub, then smashed the nightclub's venue and almost caused a riot. Su Qingsang wasn't interested in this kind of news. These second-generation rich kids were just a little rich, but compared to real aristocratic families, they were far from being rich. She had also attended a few of Hu Jinyao's gatherings with his childhood friends, but none of his friends were like this. Just as she was about to close the news, her eyes fell on the accompanying photo of the news. There were two people in the photo, both of whom Su Qingsang knew. One was the woman she had spoken to the other day, and the other was Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang looked at the photo for a moment, and her mind went blank for a moment. She thought she had seen it wrong. However, no matter how she looked at it, that person was Hu Jinyao. The other woman was the one she had met at the company. Su Qingsang read the news again. Because the news about the other two rich kids was relatively big, mobile phones were now popular. She only browsed through the news, and not only did she find the photos of the two rich kids fighting, but she also found the video of the fight on the local portal. In the video, Su Qingsang didn't pay attention to the scene of a group of people fighting. She only stared at Hu Jinyao and the woman sitting not far away. From the video, it could be seen that the woman had been sitting close to Hu Jinyao. Hu Jinyao didn't push her away. Not only did he not push her away, but he also reached out to help her when the woman was about to get up. Then the woman left for a while and came back. When she came back, she threw herself into Hu Jinyao's arms. The video ended here. Su Qingsang watched the video again and her expression was a little ugly. Of course, she was willing to believe Hu Jinyao, and she also believed that he must have a reason to go to that kind of place with that woman. But, she thought of Hu Jinyao's hand on that woman's body, and the way that woman threw herself at Hu Jinyao. Su Qingsang suddenly became angry. Even if she had misunderstood, couldn't Hu Jinyao stay away from that woman? She was angry, so she took out her phone and called Hu Jinyao without thinking. Hu Jinyao didn't answer the first time and only answered the second time. Qingsang? Hu Jinyao's voice sounded a little hoarse as if he hadn't slept well. Su Qingsang could hear it and her heart ached a little. Her determination to find Hu Jinyao and ask him didn't decrease at all, but her expression became a lot calmer. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.